Good morning, Eric Blank. Today is August 21st, 2025, and this is the Commissioner's deliberation meeting in the Public Service Company of Colorado Just Transition Solicitation 24A-0442E. Mr. Eden, you want to get us going? You're muted.
Off to a great start. My name is Michael Eden, with your advisors. So per the chair's request at Monday's CDM, advisors suggest first revisiting the issue of the just transition modeling credits. Advisors understand that on Monday there was a 2-1 vote to adopt the just transition credits as proposed, but have one and potentially more portfolios modeled without the credits. And as a brief refresh, the just transition credits are applied to bids within coal transition communities to make those bids look more economically attractive in the phase 2 modeling. The credits consist of a base credit for bids within a target community, and then 2 potential bonus credits for bids that are estimated to create more than 20 long-term jobs, and bids that are estimated to provide more than $4 million in annual property taxes. The total potential credits, including both bonuses, is $2 a kilowatt month or $4 a megawatt hour. Unless you have any other questions, I'll turn it over for you for your continued discussion.
Yeah, so I'd just say after listening to Commissioner Gilman's concerns with those modeling credits, I went back and re-reviewed the record. And given the magnitudes of those credits, I now share your concerns, Commissioner Gilman, about the potential rate and adverse impacts. So I'd probably move more towards the WRA sweep proposal and just cut the base credit in half and then do away with any bonus based on asserted job or property tax benefits. I think this would take the pressure off some of the phase 2 modeling and greatly lessen the potential for unexpected rate impacts in gaming. So trying to find a middle ground. Commissioner Gilman, any thoughts on that proposal? And then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Plant.
Yes, I too came in the spirit of compromise this morning. Got more sleep than Monday. So I think it's important to stay at the beginning and not to get lost in our first discussion. I appreciate the intent of what we're trying to do here and what the company is trying to do here. But the record is pretty problematic in terms of support for the actual value, in terms of what the results may be for ratepayers. We have no idea what this will actually cost ratepayers. And then there's plenty of testimonies for the idea that just based on their structure, these credits will typically advantage fossil generation, likely in communities that have already undergone, decades of pollution from other energy sources, and likely utility-owned generation just because of the availability of transmission in those areas. So, that feeds into the concern to see where we can go here. I certainly think cutting down the credits, in part, especially since there's not a ton of justification, honestly, for why they are set at what they are set at, is a route. I also have a proposal to look at several different portfolios without the credits while not, dramatically expanding the number of portfolios here that I'm happy to lay out for you so that we can test those assumptions and really try to get a good flavor of what the actual impact is here. And so I'm happy to run through that if you'd like to hear my thought for how this could be tested in the portfolios as well.
Yeah, why don't you? Hopefully we're not adding too many runs.
Repurposing. So, and I think for me also, like, this compromise would likely come with some more uncertain language, likely in the phase 1 order, that it's probably premature to know at this point what impact these have, but that we're trying to set up the portfolios for phase 2 to test these different scenarios and really understand so that we can make an informed decision on them. So my thought is, based kind of at the starting point of our discussion from Monday, looking at staff's portfolios, removal of the checkpoint portfolios, substitution of one with the business as usual, which I think we all agreed to on Monday, substitution of the other checkpoint with no new utility owned gas that Commissioner Plant had suggested. I'm on board with looking at that. But then looking at staff's kind of four last portfolios, basically, I think there's some work we could do in there. Probably the least valuable to me, if the goal here is like, don't increase the number of portfolios by any, ideally not dramatically, as the certain goal. To me, the 13th and 14th were the least valuable, which kind of test different tariff assumptions. I mean, look, none of us like it, I don't think, but we're in a situation where the tariffs are going to drive potentially a lot of the pricing here in a very unpredictable way for us. And I'm not sure there's a ton of value, compared to other potential options we could run in testing those tariff scenarios. I think staff's laid out a plan to try to track the tariff costs, and maybe that is the best we can do there. So my thought would be, for 13, we take the preferred plan and test it with no JTS credits. So it just mimics preferred plan, test it with no JTS credits. On the 14th portfolio, let me look at my notes to make sure I get it right, because I had it all thought through. For portfolio 14, I would run a portfolio using social cost of carbon, using the 86% carbon reduction by 2030 to essentially mimic the current emissions trajectory. And I think, a path that is supported by a whole lot of the parties here. Use the 90% by 2033 as agreed to in the updated settlement agreement from the 2021 ERP. You'd keep the 100% by 2050 that most of the portfolios are using. I would not make that trajectory have to be linear. That seems like an artificial constraint we're not 100% sure the outcome of. And we could continue to use the 50% ownership target from the updated settlement agreement. So those would be like the rough parameters I would suggest for 14. And then I would suggest as the third modification, portfolio 3, which tests the least cost portfolio at the lowest level of carbon emissions, which is 80% by 2030. There's no company ownership target. That portfolio also should be run. I think the sole run, I don't think it needs to be a duplication without JTS credits. I think it's sort of illogical to say we are providing a view of the least cost portfolio while incorporating this kind of non-economic factor that could skew the results. So those would be my suggested changes. I'm happy to go back over them. I know they're kind of detailed, but that's where I would go as a compromise, and then really kick the determination to phase 2 when we can actually see what they do in recognition of a lot of the concerns of parties here in phase 1.
Any thoughts on lowering? I assume you favor lowering the credits, Commissioner Gilman?
It's certainly an option. I mean, I think that would be helpful, especially given a lot of the concerns about the potential outcomes here. It's so hard to say because the value is not necessarily based in anything very solid, right? So there's not a ton of reasoning for it to be what it is. There's not a ton for it to be half. I mean, clearly it would lessen the potential impacts, some of which can be good and some of which can be bad. So I think certainly what I've laid out could be done at either of the values, and I'm happy to discuss with you all what compromise we can strike that seems to make the most sense.
Commissioner Plant, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, so I, as you might expect, I'm not not supportive of reducing the modeling credit. Not to beat what appears to be a dead horse, but the I mean, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars in this thing on prospective, maybe you maybe getting some equipment that maybe we'll need, or looking into new technologies that maybe will be helpful in the future. And when it comes to like things that can directly benefit, these communities that are being really impacted by this transition, I feel like, this is a relatively small cost, and I think it's worth it, and I think it's justified. That being said, to talk about the portfolios real quickly, um, I had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to just run by you guys. I'm not sure what the benefit of a linear model is. I don't feel like emissions impacts are linear, right? I mean, when we shut down a coal plant, there's big impact. When we replace a gas plant with renewables, there's a big impact. So I'm trying to sort of in my brain connect what a linear model actually accomplishes versus just a model that would more realistically reflect what happens on the system, which in my view isn't really linear. They're kind of lumpy. Um, so I wanted to get your guys's perspective on that, whether or not that's a benefit, and we might be able to cut out a couple of sort of duplicative uh, models if we were to just take linear out and focus on the emissions and ownership and SEC and stuff like that. And then I had a question for Mr. Eden on the 2050 assumptions. I mean, we have as Commissioner Gilman pointed out, most of the assumptions are a 0% by 2050. Obviously, we're not looking at a procurement period going out that far, but some of these resources are going to still be in effect in 2050. But just as a practical matter, I mean, what is the impact of that within a model? And the reason I'm wondering is because I think back, 25 years ago, the assumption was that getting to 20% renewables was going to drive rates to 25 cents a kilowatt hour. I mean, we just don't know what technology is going to look like, 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, which will be what contributes to a 0% emissions in 2050. So are we applying sort of cost assumptions that we have today to what it would take in 2050? Uh, when, I mean, from my perspective, we don't, it's going to be, there's going to be new technologies, there's going to be lower cost technologies. I'm wondering what that parameter does, because we have a business as usual that says we're not going to do a 2050 target. We have others that say we're going to do a 0% 2050 target. What it practically does that do to our projections?
Great. Thanks for the question, Commissioner. And I'll start out with I'm no Encompass expert, but as I understand it, there's the resource acquisition period where the model's actually selecting bids to be built and serve the resource need. But the model doesn't stop at 2031 or 2033, it continues to look over the planning period, which extends through 2050. And then the model will kind of look ahead and, like you said, it'll use the generic prices with an escalation to assume or predict what the cost of new renewables and new CTs and other resources will be in the future years. And then depending on what it sees in the future years, that might impact the resources that are ultimately selected during the wrap. So for example, it could be possible that if the model sees that resources are going to be really expensive shortly after the wrap, but that there's more economical resources earlier in the wrap, it might grab those resources to try and save money later, even though that would be outside of the wrap.
And so that would the result of that be to have a higher PVRR or
Well, it would be, I mean, again, depending on the period of time with which you're looking at the PVRR, I think it would be a higher PVRR if you're just looking at the time period through the wrap. But for the model looking at through the entire planning period out through 2050, the model would see that as a lower PVRR because it gets to avoid what it assumes are going to be more expensive resources later on in the outlying years.
okay, I still don't know which.
Sorry.
Well, Mr. Eden, I don't think I'm prepared to vote on Commissioner Gomans' alternative scenarios right now. And the only thing I'd say in response to you, Commissioner Plant, was I agreed with you last deliberation that if the tax credits, if the modeling credits were small, no big deal, and we should be doing it for these communities. But when you start adding $4 a megawatt hour into the price, you can get into the hundreds of millions of dollars of additional cost. These are sizable potential adders.
Well,
So
if I could
that's
comment,
what's giving me pause.
I think that, number one, this is a cap, right? It's really it's benefiting the model with a cap of, whatever it is, 250 or, and you add in the jobs and blah, blah, blah. But it could be anywhere within that range, right? But it's going to preference that within the model. And then, as we pointed out before, if that is developed, there's going to be, the actual cost, and then there's going to be the actual savings as it relates to property tax. And we can evaluate that when we get the modeling, and the models presented to us. And I do think that Commissioner Gilman's proposal to, you know, see what the difference is, in these various different models is a good idea, because I think that ultimately when we're choosing a portfolio, we want to know, okay, what did this one preference these resources in these communities, what is the actual cost? Rather than, to say, well, if we put in this amount of a credit, it's going to have potentially this amount of cost, or maybe not. I mean, it's just preferencing it within the model. We don't know what the cost is going to be till we run the model. And then we have a choice. Then we can say, it's worth it. It's going to cost $30 million more. That's worth it. We should do it. Or, it's going to cost $100 million more. It's not worth it. We're not going to do it. But if we don't, I just feel like it gives us those options when it comes to selecting the portfolio later on. But I wanted to also get your perspectives on this linear issue, because I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around why that is valuable.
Can we hold on the linear issue for 1 minute?
Yeah.
I know we're in
Yeah.
like hour 47, so who cares
Who's
at this
counting?
point? But
Oh,
so I guess my proposal to you all for next week, whenever we come back, is to essentially soften the language in any determination we make that it's premature. We'd like to see it run both ways, and we'll make a determination if this is a great idea to apply or to make the decision based on those at the time after we get phase two. And then choose those portfolios that give us the proper tests. What I tried to do was obviously just mimic preferred portfolio, choose a different set of parameters that appear to have a wide range of support, which largely mimic the updated settlement agreement outcomes, and then test the least cost. If there's more or different that give us like a better test, I'm happy to look at that. But that was my thinking in saying those are the three that I think would test the assumptions and really let us know. I mean, yeah, it just makes resources appear cheaper than they actually are, right? That are in certain areas. So we have no idea the ratepayer impact because we don't know how many resources, we don't know how expensive of resources, and there certainly is a risk that some of those resources that know they're in those areas could be a little overpriced and still come out on top because the credit is so rich, right? So we need to have enough modeling that we can guard against these outcomes and really like understand the full picture in order to make that determination. So I think that's my pitch on where I'd love to end up here if we can get there.
yeah, I
So
support that.
just let me ask a question to Commissioner Goman. Would you support the the modeling credits as they are if you get the modeling runs you're suggesting?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you both agree that those properly kind of test the bounds and test the assumptions, I mean, what we're going to see is how does the resource mix change? How does the location of resources change? And how does the total cost of the portfolio change, right? If they're removed, I can do that with either half the cost or the total cost. It doesn't sound like we're going to get Commissioner Plant on half the value. I think it still serves the purpose, even if we use the full value when we have these test cases in there. I mean,
But
it's hard to say because we have no idea the ratepayer impact anyway, right? So it's hard to say, halving it doesn't half the ratepayer impact. Like it's not commensurate like that. It's just going to reshuffle the resources. So it's hard because it wasn't based on anything solid to start with, but I'm really open to doing it either way. I just think doing it without them is crucial to be able to see the bounds of what we're actually deciding.
hey, Commissioner Plant, how about we leave the base credit, the base modeling credit where it is, but do away with the jobs and the property tax one. So it's just a $2 a kilowatt hour and whatever it is, a buck a kilowatt month for capacity. And then we do the analysis Commissioner Gilman suggested, at least maybe subject to having us think about it and talk to advisors over the coming week. Would something like that work for you?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I would want to just sort of look at what that impact looks like. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're doing runs with some economic consideration. And I
All right.
wanted to just clarify, Commissioner Gilman, I don't know if you have the same table. I think maybe you have the same table that's based off of the staff with some changes. But you're looking at basically what I think in the table I have, which you can tell me if it's one you have, model number 10, basically doing that without the JT credits.
I think incorrect. So if you take the staff table that had 1 through 14.
Yeah,
Okay. And then the first one we're talking about repurposing to be no new utility owned gas
right,
with me. And number 2, business as usual.
right.
So those took the place of the 2 checkpoints.
Yeah.
And then numbers 11 through 14 staff had provided as just tests of the preferred portfolio, basically with different
Yep.
assumptions. I find the two last of those the least valuable, testing the different tariff assumptions. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we could know? But it all seems so wild. And I'm not even sure how we would make a solid change in what we are picking based on tariff risk. I mean, it's all over the board. So
Yeah.
my thought was to repurpose the two of those so that 13 would just be the preferred portfolio without JT credit entirely. Then number 14 would be what I outlined. I'm happy to go over it again. It's basically a lot of the updated settlement terms.
Is it 10? Is it
13 and 14.
No, but
13.
I mean, would 14 be the one that is labeled on the table 10, but minus the JT credits?
Yeah, basically, I think so. I'll check that with Mr. Eden, but I think it ends up mimicking those criteria very much, if not entirely. Yeah.
And the other one was number
Great.
3 without the JT credits.
Yeah. And not like as a version, just as the portfolio for number 3. To me, it's kind of nonsensical to call it least cost if you're putting in these non-economic things that may skew the results. Let's figure out what the actual least cost is, which doesn't include social cost of carbon. It won't include the credits. It's just run it and see what resources it wants with the least cost.
So you'd be replacing 3 with basically 4 minus the JT credits,
3 would just have no JT credits as a criteria.
but it's still going to be 80-30 instead of 90-33.
Yeah. And I think that is the most kind of unconstrained look to really try to find the least cost, which I think necessarily would have to do away with this non-economic kind of trigger we're putting in there. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So I support not having the JTS credits in Model 3. I'd like to take another look at 13 and 14 and think about that with advisors. It sounds like we may get a 3-0 vote, doing away with the bonus credits, leave the base where it is, and some additional modeling runs to look at, as Commissioner Gilman suggested. And then Commissioner Plant, so Commissioner Gilman, if you can give to advisors your proposal on the model runs, maybe in writing if you have it. And
Yeah,
then,
but thanks for clarifying, Commissioner Plant. It basically is number 10 without JT credit. As I look at it, but I'll confirm with Mr. Eden. And the only other thing I wanted to say, if you guys are really attached to the existing 13 and 14, I think we're targeting 14, right?
I'm
It
not.
ends
I
up
don't. I
15
think
because they're
Well,
really valuable.
but before
go.
we get to the tariff thing, let's take the next item on the agenda up,
Sure.
which is the tariffs and the language in the offtake agreement. And then the last thing is I'll commit, and hopefully Commissioner Gilman will too, to look at sort of the pathway to the emissions reductions, and be prepared to talk more about the linear versus, it's flat and then you fall off a cliff. So maybe we can have that discussion next time we reconvene too, Commissioner Plant.
Great. Thanks.
If I could jump in, one quick question advisors had was on Commissioner Plant's proposed no new utility-owned gas portfolio. It sounds like there's agreement on that as replacing one of the check portfolios, but to round that out, advisors would recommend that portfolio be run with the social cost of carbon. It would have an 80% by 2030 emissions pathway and a 50% company ownership requirement and no additional emissions constraint, meaning there wouldn't be that linear requirement. But I wanted to see if the commission was okay with that.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I think that's good. Again, those are two of the things that I'm still a little unclear about what the impact is on the model, is that linear and the 2050 zero constraint. I honestly, I want to know if we're sort of preemptively making things more expensive just because we don't know what technologies are going to be in the future. And uh,
I I totally share that concern. The more I'm thinking about this in real time, the more I want to take out all those linear things. I think I agree with you. It would save a bunch of modeling runs. So um,
but yeah, let's look at that. Initially I'm fine with the social cost of carbon and the 50% ownership. Um, just taking it out of gas is my primary concern. Um, and sort of the stranded asset risk that goes with that. So
Commissioner Goen, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I'm generally agreeable to the terms that Mr. Eden laid out for portfolio one. And
Right.
I don't disagree with the sentiment. We're in a wild environment to understand current and future pricing.
All
We'll do
right.
what we can.
Well, I think I don't know, keep us moving, Mr. Eden.
All right, sounds good. We'll do. So I'll jump to the tariff pass-through concept next. And in its answer testimony, CIEA argued that project bidding in 2026 would be throwing darts at a board as to tariffs on equipment delivered in 2029 or 2030. CIEA recommended the Commission allow limited repricing for all projects or pass through via the ECA of the actual cost of any tariffs incurred. In cross answer, staff opposed CIEA's specific approach, arguing that all tariff risk from bid pricing could result in that removing all tariff risk could result in poor decisions. Staff instead puts forth a modified approach that would accomplish the same result. And under that proposal, bidders would be required to estimate tariff costs based on known current tariff rates and include them as a separate component of the bid price in addition to a base price component. Developers would be allowed to increase prices up to 20% based on tariffs after providing tariff cost documentation for verification through an independent auditor process. Public Service generally supports staff's proposal with certain modifications that have previously been briefed on. CIEA generally supports staff's proposal as modified, but argues for flexibility with the 20% cap, including the ability for bidders to exceed the cap to walk away from the PPA without forfeiting their security. CEI supports the pass-through concept, but argues that information bidders provide to substantiate the tariff claims should be minimized due to anti-competition concerns. CEI recommends the Commission approve the process with a commitment to further modification and a stakeholder process between the Phase 1 decision and the Phase 2 RFP. CEC supports the proposal except for the 20% cap. CEC recommends the Commission should instead approve a more reasonable ceiling for tariff increases that qualify for automatic pass-throughs, such as a 5% or 10% of the overall project cost. So I'll pause here unless you would like a recommendation.
So I guess for me, I struggle with these project-specific approaches to adjusting bids and prefer to do what we did in the last IRP and provide relief as necessary across all bids on an equal basis by technology. Given that many bidders may not know the specific equipment that they're using when they bid the project, it just seems like there's potential for gaming and making the initial bids less relevant. So I'd probably adopt the CEC proposal and cap any adjustment to more like 5 to 10%, a 20% price adjustment on a project specific basis just seems too high to me. So Commissioner Goman, anywhere you'd like to go? And I guess this also gets back to if we're going to have 20% increases, maybe we do need some phase 2 modeling. So
Right. And to my point, I don't think 14 is not a magic number. We were trying to show restraint. So my point was if you're incredibly tied to 13 or 14, perhaps we end up with a 15 portfolio instead of canning one of my ideas. That was my pitch.
Well, as this is an ongoing negotiation, I'm
Thank you.
dragging this issue into the negotiation because I'm scared of 20% price adjustments.
Yeah, I mean, this is a wild time to have to figure this out, honestly. I mean, 20% sounds like a ton more expensive for ratepayers, but like in real life, these tariffs are massive expense for ratepayers. And so, I don't know. I was pretty on board with staff's approach where I think more transparency would be helpful. We were really caught off guard in the 2021 ERP, obviously years into it, with really unprecedented and like unpredictable things going on with pricing. Um, so I tended to think in that process, I would have loved more transparency from the get-go about what were the assumptions and then what does it actually look like is fair to adjust it to. Whether that's individual or across the board, I mean, we still have no like baseline to understand what people are assuming so that like we can't really understand the actual tariff impacts of specific changes. Um, so I struggle with it a bit. I was on board with staffs because I like the idea of having more transparency and having like actual numbers to base something on. The
But
2021 was like,
is it based on anything if you don't know what equipment you're using?
well, yeah, I mean, I would assume they're pricing some equipment, right? So I would presume that is the assumption. Um, I think so. I'm curious to hear from Commissioner Plant. I tend to like real numbers better. And then you really have a much better compass with which to determine like what actually sounds fair. I don't want to get caught off guard trying to back calculate this with a whole array of factors and we're just kind of picking a number. But also because we don't even understand what portion of a project's total cost is made up by the things being impacted by the tariffs. So it gets to be very difficult to just pick a number. So I like the transparency that came with that. The other thing I would say is I may not share your passion for giving everyone the same across the board adjustment. Like I would rather it be a little mathematically based, but I do think it's important that all bidders, basically meaning IPPs and the company, experience the same risks and the same expectations here with regard to what adjustments may occur in the future. So I didn't want that to go unsaid. Whatever this ends up being, they're all the same to me in terms of like what qualifies, what's the percentage. Um, so yeah, for what that's worth. But happy to hear from Commissioner Plant on the approach.
Yeah,
Commissioner Plant.
I don't know that I'm going to provide any kind of great insight here. I mean, I appreciate Commissioner Gilman's sort of engineering mind and trying to grasp onto precision, but I think we're also in a world here where, I mean, it depends on the technology, it depends on the tariff level, which seems to change constantly. It depends on, what the makeup is of the various different, technologies that are being considered, and it's all different and it's always changing. It's kind of like trying to grasp the error, to say we're gonna get something right. I would be okay, Mr. Chairman. I mean, you have a much better sense of sort of how these bids are constructed because you've done them before. I mean, I would be comfortable with reducing the 20% to 10%, say. Um, Again, I think it's all, you know, it's all kind of trying to figure out, the best of worst, selection. So it seems like uh, that might be a way to go. I don't think we're going to get precision, no matter how we do this. I am, I am concerned about the sort of gaming issues that you brought up, and minimizing that. The one other thing that I would just throw out there, as you're looking at this over the next few days, I don't think we need number 9, the modeling run number 9. So we could maybe, if we do this, keep it still to 14. That being said, yeah, I'd be good with doing the CEC 10%, and running that model if that seems like the right number. If it's not, then
It's always easy to raise price. I just hate raising it from the get-go.
right. But I mean, the other thing though that I think about is you don't know what your competitors in the bidding are doing, right? I mean, and you still want to stay competitive.
Right, so you
So,
do a lower upfront price and then you do a 20% increase
right.
later.
Yeah.
I guess Commissioner Gilman, would you be all right with a 10% cap? I think that still give you the information you're looking for. And we'll hammer in the order that IPPs and utility owns are treated the same.
Excellent. That's it.
All right. We're moving, mystery.
Okay. So I'm going to turn to a few issues regarding the nuances of how the phase 2 modeling will be conducted, starting with the best-in-class modeling. The company proposes to keep the same best-in-class process for reducing the number of bids as it used in the 2021 ERP. The company explains it will evaluate each technology class separately by utilizing the partial unit optimization feature to solve for the least cost portfolio comprised solely of that technology class. Projects will be selected to be advanced further in this initial selection process or best-in-class approach by determining if any partial amount of a unit was picked by the model as part of a least cost solution. Staff raises concerns regarding the use of the best-in-class process and recommends public service be required to notify staff of all modeling changes or challenges encountered in phase 2, update staff if the company decides to use best-in-class in phase 2, and consult with staff should further due diligence eliminate more bids after the best-in-class process. CIEA recommends modifying this process so that it considers both transmission and project location factors. Specifically, CIEA requests that the company conduct partial optimization runs among the projects located inside the Denver metro constraint. The second modification would be to sort projects not only by lowest PVRR, but also by transmission cost, so that some of the projects that do not have the lowest cost could still be sent on to computer modeling if they have lower interconnection or delivery costs. And I'll stop here for any questions or I have a recommendation.
I'd be all right with a recommendation on this one.
Sure. The company legitimately argues that the best-in-class process may be necessary to timely model numerous bids. However, eliminating bids through the best-in-class process does come with some risks. Advisors agree with CIEA's recommendations to incorporate transmission and location considerations into the best-in-class process. In addition, advisors recommend the Commission grant staff's recommendations and direct public service to inform staff of the following model updates in phase 2. Modeling changes or challenges encountered between the phase 1 decision and the actual modeling in phase 2. The company's modeling decisions regarding the application of the best-in-class modeling and the elimination of bids caused by due diligence after the best-in-class process. Advisors recommend rejecting CIEA's related request to require public service to notify all parties in the commission or submit status reports if the bid evaluation effort encounters difficulties. Given the numerous interveners active in this proceeding and other demands on the commission's time, such a process would likely cause damaging delays.
Commissioner Gilman.
Thanks, Mr. Eden. Yeah, I agree with you on all accounts, and maybe just wanted to add something to the modeling updates section. To me, this is kind of a bigger issue than just Encompass modeling updates, and I want to reflect that. We had some really concerning issues in the process for the 2021 ERP. including, hearing only in phase 2 that we needed new thermal generation, specifically in Alamosa, that we needed new thermal generation in other specific locations that seemingly only the company knew about. And that's a very concerning way for phase 2 to play out. So I think we need to, first of all, kind of recognize those failures in this decision, but also we need to ensure that if the company is or becomes aware of any specific system requirements that could relate to types of generation, geographical preference or placement of generation or needs of the system. And this could be within Encompass or outside of Encompass in their, additional reliability screens and other work that they're doing, that information should be available to all bidders immediately. In the case that the RFP has already been issued, it should go to staff immediately, and we're going to have to figure out the next steps. I'm very concerned about a process where all but one of the bidders don't understand where there is a need or preference for certain specific resources. So I think we really need to ensure that we're pretty clear on our expectations around this, but otherwise I agree with your recommendation.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I would agree with the recommendation and Commissioner Gilman's additions.
That's what I.
Okay, so moving along, in its phase 2 modeling, public service must make certain assumptions regarding planned combustion turbines or CTs, specifically the 200 megawatt Fort Lupton CT that was at issue in the CEP delivery decision, as well as existing units, specifically the Plains End PPA and the Cherokee Unit 4 company-owned CT. Relatedly, the company requests Commission authorization to extend the life of Cherokee Unit 4 from 2027 to the end of 2028. In its SOP, staff recommends the Commission direct the company to assume that the resource acquisition of Plains End is successful and reflect the longer asset life past the 2033 extension date. Direct the company to include the 200 megawatt Fort Lupton CT as part of its base modeling assumptions, and approve the company's proposed delay in the retirement date of Cherokee Unit 4. UCA largely mirrors staff's recommendations. Now, the Environmental Justice Coalition, or the EJC, recommends the Commission reject the company's request to extend the life of Cherokee 4 by 1 year. EJC argues that the Cherokee gas plant is located in a DI community in the North Denver area, and that in addition to the gas plant, the Suncor oil refinery, I-25 and I-70, and several Superfund sites all pollute and harm the nearby communities. EJC asserts the company should retire the unit as planned and not extend its life by 1 year. EJC also argues that public service should be prohibited from accepting any gas bids for projects located in Pueblo County. Public service agrees with the recommendations from staff and UCA that the phase 2 modeling should include the expected 200 megawatt Fort Lupton CT and the requested extension of Cherokee Unit 4. The company disagrees with the recommendations about Plains End. The company argues the extension of Plains End beyond 2033 could have an impact on the final resource mix selected, especially units that would achieve a COD in 2031. And then regarding Cherokee Unit 4, public service puts forward considerable evidence that Cherokee Unit 4 provides critical energy capacity, reserves, and significant system operations benefits, particularly related to reliability and relieving transmission congestion in the Denver metro area. So I'll stop here if you have any questions, or I can jump to a recommendation.
That'd be great.
Advisors recommend granting staff's recommendations, which UCA mirrored, including staff's position regarding Plains End. Advisors find both of the company's arguments about Plains End to be unpersuasive. The phase 2 modeling must make an assumption either way about whether Plains End remains on the system, and given the attractiveness of extending existing gas units in lieu of building new ones, the noted cost increase and supply issues with new CTs, and the projected need for new capacity, the best assumption is that Plains End continues past 2033. And then regarding delaying the retirement date of Cherokee Unit 4, advisors recommend rejecting EJC's request to deny the 1-year life extension. Advisors acknowledge EJC's points about the unit being located in a DI community. Nevertheless, the record contains considerable evidence that looking at a system as a whole, including the potential impacts to reliability and ratepayers, extending the life of this plant is the best available options. And then advisors similarly recommend rejecting EJC's request to prohibit gas bids in Preble County. It would be premature for the commission to decide that in phase 1.
Commissioner Goman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
as do I.
Okay. So consistent with phase 2 of the last ERP, for modeling purposes, the company assumes that natural gas-fired units will have a book life of 25 years. In general, the company's phase 2 modeling also requires the model to reach 100% clean energy by 2050, which assumes no new gas assets will convert to hydrogen, which assumes that the new gas assets will convert to hydrogen or cease operating. Public Service explains that it allows the model to build electrolyzers to produce hydrogen, store hydrogen, and build the generation and transmission required to power the electrolyzers. The model can then burn hydrogen it produces in its thermal fleet. As you know, CEO, WRA Sweep, and Conservation Coalition and CC4CA make numerous recommendations regarding the thermal unit assumptions. Again, I'm not going to try to repeat everything in public, but I'll provide some of the highlights for context. Some of CEO's recommendations include the following: requiring Public Service to model the extension of existing gas units, so long as they do not need to be retired due to the state implementation plan. Direct the company to model an annual firm gas supply cost escalator sensitivity for each resource portfolio. Direct Public Service to require all gas-only bids to have a useful life of no later than 2050. And direct Public Service to require hydrogen-capable bids and bids that will rely on carbon capture to include numerous details regarding the costs of hydrogen conversion. WRA's and Sweep recommendations include limiting the the capacity factor of new gas units to 40%, consistent with the current EPA power plant rules, and including hydrogen transportation and conversion costs to ensure that the company is fully accounting for those costs. Conservation Coalition similarly argues that the phase 2 modeling should depreciate the cost of each new gas bid no later than 2050, except where the bid contains both a plan for the gas resource to be zero emitting by 2050 and the cost for such plans are included in the model. And then CC4CA echoes many of the arguments from CEO, WRA Sweep, and CC4CA also asks that Public Service include information regarding projected particulate matter emissions and specifically PM 2.5 for each of the portfolios it presents in the 120-day report. So I'll stop here to check in, but I also have a recommendation on this one.
Well, you want to break down the decision points? It seems like there's 3 or 4 decision points. Do you want to start with depreciation, or how do you want to do this, Mr. Eden?
Sure, I can try and start with depreciation and then pause for your discussion. Advisors recommend requiring Public Service for purposes of the phase 2 modeling to limit the depreciation lives for new gas assets to 2050. I would add, however, that this restriction should not apply to the recommended business as usual portfolio, which is required to meet the 80% by 2030 requirement, but not the 100% by 2050 clean energy goal.
Let me jump in. So I guess my concern with the 2050 date is just that if you have a cliff in there, it may force gas to come on early. And I'm wondering if we should just, instead of a 25-year depreciation, just do a 23-year depreciation. And then there's no cliff date. And it does what we did last time, but just takes a couple of years off. So Commissioner Goman, anywhere you want to go, 2050, 23 years, curious to hear where you're coming from.
Yeah, okay, so I'm trying to think it through. So if you do 2030, anything developed pretty soon would like roughly be 2050 anyway. But then your concern is if you had like gas that was wanted a few years later, it would maybe the model would make it look like it should come on sooner than it would have because of the date. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think that's not a concern. No, I mean, I think that seems like a relatively decent way to do it. You know, maybe we'd be off by a year or two, but I think your pitch is that's potentially less impactful than if the model is changing when things should be acquired because of that. So, and I will remind, I think we know, but maybe not everyone. In real life, we are not depreciating them yet to be fully depreciated by 2050. This is for the purpose of the modeling. So there is a lot of daylight there. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I mean, when's the earliest really that realistically a gas CT acquired as part of this RFP would come online? You might be wrong about 23 years. That's my only point to get to 2050. That feels
Yeah,
optimistic, right? We're hearing
that's
everywhere it's roughly a 5-year timeline. And we haven't even done the RFP and done this yet. So I think the most accurate, like actual numbers would be you actually see one come online in 2030, and that's 20 years. So perhaps that would be my counter to your offer would be just make it 20, don't make it 2050, make it 20 years. And then I could agree because I agree with your premise. I just think we're probably a little further from building a new gas turbine than 2 years away.
your plan, 20 years, 20 years, 2050, anywhere you'd like to go.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I hadn't really thought, I mean, I was sort of leaning towards the 2050 because then that would adjust with whatever date it was coming on, but I hadn't really thought about um, how that might force things to come on earlier. I also, you know, it may also force IPP projects as opposed to utility-owned projects because they're not depreciating over, over a short period of time, which is something that I wanted. So, yeah, I think I would be fine with, I mean, the 2050 seems like it adjusts to, whenever it comes on. But again, I don't fully understand the modeling impacts of that. So, I mean, I'd be fine with a 20 or a 23. Um, you're going to make me pick one, aren't you?
About 22. Can we agree on that, Commissioner
Yeah.
Goen? Cut the baby in half.
It is less realistic than 20. I mean, do we have any reason to believe we can get a gas CT online 3 years from right now? We
We
don't even
may
have
need
it.
to.
No.
We may need to. I think they do have, I think the company does have CTs in the queue. And hopefully they have sites developed if we need it for reliability. So maybe, I don't know. I don't think this record's clear.
I'll give you a 22.
All right, 22 it is.
It's a science mystery.
Yes, very exact.
Right. So I'll move on to the another recommendation here that advisors agree with public service position that developers should not be mandated to include hydrogen conversion costs for any gas project bid into the JTS, requiring bidders to estimate how much it would cost to burn 100% hydrogen in 2050 could discourage gas bids, including PPA gas bids. In addition, such estimates could vary widely. On the other hand, any bid that is proposing to combust hydrogen within the RAP or produce hydrogen within the RAP must clearly outline assumptions and costs related to hydrogen production and transportation. And I'll stop here for a vote on this issue.
You want to give us a recommendation?
That was the recommendation. I would,
Oh, sorry.
not require bidders to estimate costs for hydrogen conversion unless that they're planning on actually doing so within the RAC.
Commissioner Goman.
Yeah, I mean, I agree largely on the basis that these costs are entirely unknown at this point. Although, it still is a concern that we're not seeing the entire cost of this like kind of hypothetical future of gas plants coming online right now. You know, hypothetically, they could go to carbon capture and storage, they could go to hydrogen, but we're not seeing the actual capital cost of that changeover, which I think lends support to Commissioner Plant's suggestion with regard to the portfolios, because there is this large, like, unknown risk associated with these plans as to what that capital cost is. So that's why I say I agree with your recommendation here, because I think in part we've really tried to recognize that, especially capital risk elsewhere, which satisfies me at this point.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree.
As do I.
Okay. And then consistent with the request from CEO and CC4CA, advisors recommend directing public service to present an analysis in the 120-day report that evaluates one, which existing gas units with PPAs have contracts that expire during the RAP and whether they can be extended and for how long. Two, the cost and feasibility of any updates that are needed to extend the lives of company-owned units. And three, information about any existing units, whether IPP or company-owned, that are not able to be extended. This requirement is appropriate in the light of the company's failure to include a discussion of the Plains End PPA extension in phase 2 of the 2021 ERP. We would recommend rejecting various recommendations that the company should be required to model the extension of existing gas units, however. There could be instances in which a PPA does not submit a bid to extend a gas unit, or the company is unable to extend the life of one of its own units.
Commissioner Goman.
Yes, I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
I also agree.
As do I.
Correct. Advisors recommend granting CEO's request to require the company to model an annual firm gas supply cost escalator. Rather than requiring the sensitivity for each resource portfolio, however, advisors recommend requiring it only on the company's preferred portfolio. Advisors recommend adopting the proposed escalator metrics set forth in the company's supplemental draft.
Commissioner Goman.
Yes, I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I agree with this to the extent that it also, and I don't know if Mr. Eden, if you can shine any light on this, if this incorporates sort of price risk associated with the gas, or if it's just picking an escalator amount. I just feel like the sort of the national and the international gas situation is changing pretty dramatically. I was thinking about this the other day. When I was at the energy office, the country was building, LNG terminals for import of gas because we were going to run out, and now we've just like turned those around and we're exporting. And there seems to be more and more demand for it. And I know that there are some projections that would, up to double the cost of natural gas in the country just because of the market. And that risk, I think, is pretty substantial. I just don't know how we model it or if the best we can do is an escalator.
Sure. Well, and I would just respond quickly that um, there's a separate kind of price of gas forecast that's in section 211 of volume 2 that provides the industry's best guess right now about how gas prices will be increasing over the planning period. This issue is more related to the cost of having a firm capacity within the gas pipeline that's always going to be available for that CT when needed. Right now, it's at $21 kilowatt year, and then the company says for this escalator, it would just increase that at an inflation rate of 2.5% annually. So, like assuming that it's going to cost more each year to have that firm capacity reserved in the pipeline.
Yeah, that's probably the best we can do, I guess. So I would support that.
As do I.
Okay. And then on the last point on this section, advisors would reject WRA and SWEEP's recommendations to limit the capacity factor of new gas units to 40%. It's unclear whether the current EPA power plant rules will change significantly, and we would reject CC4CA's request that Public Service include information regarding projected PM 2.5 emissions. The general knowledge that gas plants emit pollutants, including particulates, is uncontested and can be considered by the Commission in Phase 2, but a detailed analysis of the impacts of the specific types of pollutants is better left for Colorado's air permitting authorities.
Commissioner Gilman.
I agree. I had two other brief things I wanted to bring up, but I'll wait until we vote on this, but like related to gas plants and risks. But I agree with your recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I agree as well. You know, I'm sympathetic to the 40% argument, but I also don't know if in the modeling that would, you know, just increase the number of gas plants that are operating at, you know, 40%. With respect to PSR's, you know, recommendation regarding the health impacts, I think we pretty fairly capture that within the social cost of carbon. And as you pointed out, that the air regulation component of that is kind of outside of our purview. So I would agree with your recommendation.
As would I. Commissioner Gilman, two more issues.
Yeah, sorry, and mostly apologies to Mr. Eden for just bringing this up now, but I figure we could talk about it next week if we want to talk about it more. Yeah, Commissioner Plant, I know another risk I've brought up in the past in terms of having concern about, especially related to new gas plants, is in addition to like potential wholesale cost of gas in the future, given our state policy ambitions regarding essentially reduced use of retail natural gas, a potential concern that large firm customers like this may bear a higher percentage of system costs at some point that is not being modeled. So non-commodity fixed system costs, the more retail sales go down, the higher portion conceivably gas plants and other large users would bear to support the existing infrastructure. So that's just another price risk. I don't know how we model that. I don't know how we really, but I think acknowledging it is important because it just is another risk associated with the gas plants. The other thing worth mentioning too is I don't think, or I haven't seen good insights as we get these bids for gas plants with regard to what, if any, new gas infrastructure will be caused to support the plants. I mean, clearly here we're pretty focused on the electric infrastructure and their interconnection and transmission to connect the plants. But there is an example right now in the GIP of a project that refers to a gas plant as part of the need for a tens of millions of dollars new gas pipeline, or upsized or relocated, right? Whatever you want to say. So just to say, like, I think we have a blind spot also in terms of understanding the potential gas system costs associated with the gas plants that are just not being disclosed or calculated here. So I'm happy, and I'm real sorry, Mr. Eden, to just bring this up in now, but happy to talk to Mr. Eden if there's like a proposal. Maybe that's something we get in gas plant bids. It's like, is there sufficient capacity right now, or are there other future costs on the gas system that will be caused by that infrastructure? So just throw that out there as two other price risks that are kind of specific to the gas issues.
I'd wouldn't mind putting something in the order on both issues, but ask the company to evaluate whether specific bids or proposals have upgrades required on the natural gas system. I think that should be part of the evaluation. I mean, those are real costs, so I don't know that the IPPs are going to be able to bid it that way, but as part of the evaluation, maybe the company can take a look at it. So, Commissioner Plant, comments?
Yeah, I'd support that as well. And, maybe we can also include in our order for the next ERP, having the parties really opine on how we incorporate some of these risks in the modeling, and whether or not there is a good method out there for trying to incorporate these potential risks.
Yeah, and I want to be thoughtful about it too, because if only the company knows where there is sufficient capacity on the gas system and they're bidding gas plants, that creates its own set of problems in pricing this. So I want to approach this carefully, but these are real costs and somehow we need to understand them.
Totally agree. Mr. Eden, does that give you what you need on this one?
Yeah, it's my understanding that will require the company to provide some evaluation in connection with new gas projects and the 120-day report, and then also encourage parties in the 2028 ERP to evaluate this issue and see if there's better ways to work in these additional costs. So the next issue is the generic cost for resources. And in rebuttal, public service raises the concern that generic prices proposed in phase one are significantly below the current market expectations, in some cases, maybe by as much as half of the reasonable expectation for JTS bid prices. The company recommends using the revised generic bid prices for phase two that are included in attachment JTL-10. The company also proposes a mechanism in phase two to automatically adjust generic pricing based on the actual pricing of the bids. In essence, the mechanism would kick in if there was a 20% difference in the expected generic prices and would update the generics to have the 2030 generic price match the median bid price from the RFP. The generic prices will then escalate into the future using the price escalation curve of these new generics. Staff opposes the company's proposal to update generic prices. Staff asserts the proposed method is not transparent, verifiable, or appropriate basis for price updates. Instead of the company's proposal, staff argues the commission should order the company to use public and verifiable sources for its generic pricing assumptions. Staff reasons these types of public sources are driven by long-term trends and are less impacted by year-over-year volatility. Staff also requests the company be required to confer with staff and the IE to discuss the appropriate update for all generic prices prior to phase two modeling. Staff notes this would be similar to the process the company followed in the last ERP. Would you like a recommendation on this one?
I would.
Advisors recommend approving the company's proposed mechanism to automatically adjust for generic pricing based on the actual pricing of the bids. Advisors agree with staff that using public and verifiable resources are generally preferable. Advisors are worried that such sources will not capture the recent impacts to pricing caused by the reconciliation bill and tariff uncertainty. Given the dynamic, uncertain environment, advisors are concerned that looking at the long-term trends presented by public service could underplay or ignore recent developments. While advisors disagree with the primary recommendation, we recommend granting staff's second request and directing public service to confer with staff and IE to discuss the appropriate update for all generic pricing prior to the phase two modeling. But to be clear, we would adopt the company's proposed mechanism to base generic pricing on the bids received in the RFP.
Commissioner Goman.
I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
I also agree.
As do I.
Good. So I'm going to turn now to a few issues related to resource acquisitions, starting with the short list and best and final offer. CIEA argues that the size of these solicitations, the inflationary environment, and the delays witnessed in the last ERP justify a new process that would allow a subset of bids to refresh their prices. Under this best and final offer approach, bids in the approved portfolio plus the INP bids would be allowed a 10% price refresh opportunity after the phase two decision. Public service would then re-rank the projects based on the updated pricing retaining competitive tension, and increasing the chances that the final portfolio would succeed. The company would ultimately provide a notice of final portfolio and offer the remaining bids the option to join the INP. CIEA draws a comparison to the INP process in which the pool of backup bids are allowed a limited price refresh. CIEA asserts it's illogical that the backup bids are allowed to reprice, but the initial winning bids are not. Interwest also supports this concept. The company opposes the concept but does not expressly address it in its rebuttal or its statement of position. So I'll stop here unless you have any questions or would like a recommendation.
If you could give a recommendation, that'd be great.
Advisors recommend rejecting this concept for purposes of this JTS. It's not clear to advisors that there would be sufficient competitive tension during the final offer price refresh to prevent gaming. In addition, it's far from certain that the unexpected cost increases and delays that occurred in the last ERP will again repeat in the JTS. Nevertheless, advisors are intrigued about this best and final offer approach and recommend directing public service to confer with CIEA prior to the 2028 ERP about a modified best and final offer approach. Specifically, the conferral should examine whether PPA execution could be a component of this process. Advisors also suggest requiring public service to address this concept as part of its direct case in the next ERP.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Platt,
I also agree.
as do I.
All right, turning next to bid fees. Public service does not propose increasing the bid fees, but recommends removing most of the options for bidding multiple variations of a project under a single bid fee. This is done in part to reduce the administrative burden of managing the complexity of multiple options. The company has maintained two single bid fee options related to backup fuel for thermal generation and the prospective May Valley Longhorn Extension transmission line. In addition, any bid selected to begin PPA negotiations is also required to pay a second bid fee, which is refunded if the PPA is executed. Interwest characterizes the company's proposal as overly aggressive and argues that it will lead to fewer bids and higher costs. Interwest argues that bidders are not in a good position to evaluate the benefits of variations. Interwest specifically recommends that the commission deny the company's requirement that all project bids be subject to a separate bid fee, as well as the company's proposal to impose a second bid fee. In its statement of position, Pivot similarly recommends that the commission should direct public service to eliminate the second bid fee and direct public service to charge a bid fee of only $750 for projects sized between 100 kilowatts and 2 megawatts. Conversely, CIEA seems to agree with public service that the large number of bid variations, especially compared to the actual number of projects, contributed to the modeling issues in the 2021 ERP. CIEA recommends that bid variations be allowed under the same bid fee, but that be limited to the May Valley Longhorn Extension, a utility-owned generation option, and then overall that project should be limited to 10 variations. And I'll stop here for any questions unless you want a recommendation.
Yeah, a recommendation would be good.
Advisors recommend adopting the bid fees put forth by public service, including the second refundable bid fee for projects that begin PPA negotiations. Public service has raised legitimate concerns echoed by CIEA that evaluating numerous variations of the same projects increases the complexity and risks delay. And then there is insufficient record to determine that the level of bid fees, including for small projects, is too high, especially given that the company has not increased the bid fee since the last ERP. So we would reject Interwest's recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
Yeah, I agree with your recommendation, and maybe just wanted to emphasize, I mean, with this simplification versus the last ERP in terms of bidding, many of the PPA modifications we've made and things, certainly the expectation is this goes smoother than last time. I mean, that's the bet we're making here. So I think we just need to keep in mind all of these different modifications that have been made as we look at phase 2 and hope that moves along as swiftly as possible.
Commissioner Platt,
I agree.
as do I.
Okay, moving to some specifics of the specific requirements of the RFP. Interwest in particular recommends 5 specific changes to the RFP document, which sets forth the rules which bidders must comply with to have their bids evaluated. Public Service does not appear to respond to any of these requested changes. And if it's okay, I'll plan to present each of the 5 proposed changes one at a time, followed by an offered recommendation. The first change is that Interwest proposes is it opposes the RFP's prohibition on out-of-state company ownership bids. Interwest argues that the most cost-effective bids should win, regardless of where they are located. And I can provide a recommendation if you like.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Advisors recommend granting Interwest requests regarding out-of-state company ownership bids and directing the company to remove this prohibition from the RFP. Advisors find persuasive Interwest arguments that the most cost-effective bids should win. At the same time, however, the Commission should reiterate that the company retains discretion with its development and submission of company-owned bids.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Platt,
I agree.
as do I.
Thank you. Interwest's second challenge is to the 15-year maximum term for hybrid PPA projects. Interwest argues that the term limit on hybrid projects should match the 25-year limit on other PPAs, or should at least match the 18-year limit from the previous RFP. Would you like a recommendation?
Yep.
Advisors recommend granting Interwest's request to remove the 15-year maximum term for hybrid projects. In the last ERP, the Commission found that allowing hybrid projects to receive capacity payments, but limiting the term length of the storage component to 18 years strikes an appropriate balance between addressing the finance lease concern and allowing IPP solar plus storage bids to be more competitive. We recommend the Commission adopt the approach from the 2021 ERP and allow hybrid projects to receive capacity payments, but limit the term length of the storage component to 18 years.
I like that. I think that was the right outcome on that record and this one. Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Platt.
I agree.
Great. So Interwest's third objection concerns the RFP's exclusivity requirement. Interwest argues that developers should be able to bid the same project into multiple RFPs or otherwise sell a project that has previously been bid into public services RFP. And I have another recommendation if you would like.
That'd be great.
Advisors recommend rejecting Interwest arguments regarding the exclusivity requirement. The company, parties, and the Commission should not spend time evaluating bids that are not fully committed to public service. In addition, it appears that the exclusivity requirement to which Interwest objects was also present in the last ERP.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Platt,
I agree.
as do I.
On the fourth issue, Interwest argues that the non-price scoring analysis in the draft RFP is vague and subjective. Interwest recommends the company develop a detailed non-price scoring matrix in this RFP so that bidders are able to self-score and design their bids according to what the company expects. I'll note that CIEA also raises an objection regarding the non-price factor analysis. CIEA argues that bidder qualification should be prioritized over other non-price factors to increase the viability of bids. Would you like a recommendation on this one?
Yeah, I think I would. If you could give us a recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. Advisors are intrigued by Interwest's recommendation for the company to develop a non-price scoring matrix that would allow bidders to self-score. As Interwest sets forth, this would help ensure that the non-price criteria are reasonably objective and prevents the company from having too much discretion. Requiring this non-price scoring matrix at this stage, however, could cause confusion and potentially delay the RFP. Thus, we recommend the Commission direct Public Service to develop a non-price scoring matrix for evaluation in the company's 2028 ERP. For purposes of the JTS, advisors recommend the Commission allow the company to apply the non-price factor analysis, but require the company to notify staff anytime a bid fails the non-price factor analysis. The notification to staff must include a detailed description of why the bid should not be advanced to computer-based modeling, and staff can raise any concerns it has with the Commission at its discretion. And then finally, advisors recommend rejecting CIEA's request to prioritize bidder qualifications. Advisors are unconvinced such an approach is an appropriate way to increase the viability of bids.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, I agree with some of what you said, but not all of it. I mean, to me, if the company already intends to apply the non-price scoring to bids, they necessarily have some way in which they plan to do that, or are developing a way they plan to do that. So it certainly seems reasonable to me that such thing would be made available to bidders so they even understand what they are being scored on and the weighting of it. I mean, I don't really buy that it would be a significant delay. If this is something the company is planning on doing in phase 2, it has to exist. So I don't think the creation of it would be all that time consuming. So for me, I would significantly prefer the transparency of providing any non-price scoring matrix to bidders ahead of time. The company can explain why that doesn't exist or isn't available if they need, but it doesn't make sense they'd be able to apply something that doesn't even exist, and that would cause delays. So I would rather the transparency of making that available to bidders. But I'm fine with the rest of your points with regard to the other specifics.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'll throw out one additional thing for the 2028, is that it? ERP.
Maybe.
To get your guys's perspective on, I think for the 2028 ERP, I would like to have considered as one of the criteria whether or not a company backed out of a bid that was accepted. I feel like, there needs to be some sort of a consequence when we have, we do have, and we saw in the last ERP, there were some companies that stuck with their bid and, went all the way through. And then there were other companies that, at various different parts of the process dropped out and caused us to really experience delays when we had to go back to the backup pool, and then maybe that backup pool had gone away. And I know that we're making efforts in this ERP to sort of try and mitigate those impacts with the IMP and with the two-phase and all that sort of thing. But I just feel like if there is a consequence to backing out of an accepted bid, maybe we'd get less of those. So just wanted to throw that out as something that we might additionally add for language for the next ERP. But I agree with Commissioner Gilman's comments and the recommendation.
As do I. I'd frame it as a problem because I don't know what the solution is. I mean, I guess you could increase the bid deposit, but at the time of the bid, you don't really have a binding contract. So
yeah, I recognize that. I feel like there are companies that stick with it and there are companies that don't, and that might be something that we consider next time.
well, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, I'm good with Commissioner Plant's suggestion for the order and for 2028. Commissioner Gilman.
No, the only other thing I was going to bring up, I agree. Like, I'm not sure on Commissioner Plant's addition because I don't know the reason some of the bids fail, and I don't know that it's all the PPA bidders' fault, which I think that would kind of imply. So, I just have a wild idea, but maybe we move to like actually understanding from bidders after the process is done of those that failed, what went wrong, how did the negotiations go, what was the issue, what from the company's perspective, how did it go? It's like we're making all of these decisions here with regard to PPA terms, with regard to different portfolios, like in trying to simplify and speed up this process, but we are doing so in a somewhat opaque manner where, we're hearing from the trade associations. We're not hearing from the actual bidders. and then we're hearing from the company. And so it's very difficult for us to have like actual insights into what went on, what caused the delays, what caused those negotiations to fail, what caused them to not get there. So just a wild idea pitched for like an exit interview for
Yeah, like
bidder.
a
No,
confidential post-mortem sort
We
of a
don't
thing.
know
Yeah.
what went on, so we can't always fix it. And I think we're trying, but it's hard to tell.
I love that idea. And we have an independent auditor. Why don't we have them just do exactly that? And I do it for the 2021 process. In this order, I'd have the whatever we call it, the IE, the IA, interview the failed bids and just see if we could learn from it.
Yeah, and I think
I love that.
I do too, and I think that we need to make that a confidential,
Yeah,
postmortem because I mean the companies are not going to want to get on a blacklist because of what they say, and you know,
yeah.
so yeah, I support that.
Yeah, that's why it's got to be highly confidential and it's got to be through the IA. But
I'll work with Miss Reed and Miss McLaughlin and see if we need to brush this up a bit for next week. But it just strikes me like we have all these different decision points where we're trying to solve a problem where we have like very little insight into what really went wrong. And like, wouldn't the insight be
yeah,
nice so we could fix the right problem in the right way?
yeah,
So
with
okay, I'll
massive,
see if there's any work that needs to be done on this.
that'd be awesome if you could take that on. And I just say it's the point you made earlier. Under situation of massive uncertainty, we're trying to make decisions on records that are, somewhat out of date or incomplete. So keep going, Mr. Eden.
Okay, so the fifth and final issue Interwest raises is the deadline by which the company must submit its utility-owned bids. Interwest states that based on discovery, Public Service plans to set the due date for utility-owned bids 1 day before PPA bids. Interwest supports this plan and states it's important that utility bids do not be allowed to come in after PPA bids. Would you like a recommendation?
Sure, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, for clarity, advisors simply recommend that the commission direct that all utility bids must be finalized and submitted prior to the due date for all PPA bids.
Commissioner Goodman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I.
All right, jump into PIMS. And this next one requires a little bit of background. And in phase 2 of the 2021 ERP, three parties, staff, UCA, and CEC, supported a new type of performance incentive mechanism, or PIM, for utility-owned generation, in which Public Service would be required to recover the cost of company-owned renewable generation assets entirely through the ECA as opposed to base rates. While the Commission ultimately declined to adopt this three-party PIM, the Commission expressed an intent to further evaluate it in the JTS. As in the 2021 ERP, in this proceeding, Public Service vehemently opposes the three-party PIM. The company argues the PIM would compensate the utility strictly based on production, breaking the cost of service rate-making construct entirely. Instead of the three-party PIM, Public Service argues the Commission should continue with the use of a cost to construct, or CTC, and operations-based PIM framework, as was done in the last ERP, with the development of the mechanisms to be considered in future proceedings. Staff, one of the creators of the three-party PIM, does not recommend the Commission approve it at this time. Instead, staff argues the Commission should order the CTC and operational PIM for company-owned projects in this JTS consistent with the last ERP. If the Commission remains interested in the three-party PIM, staff recommends the Commission order the company to provide an annual calculation comparing the as-bid project revenue requirement and unit performance with the actual performance of the generating asset and actual cost recovery. In its SOP, UCA continues to advocate for the three-party PIM, arguing that it would put Public Service on equal footing with other entities, such as IPPs. If the Commission is not inclined to adopt the three-party PIM, then UCA suggests that any consideration of PIMs should be left to CPCN proceedings. And I haven't talked about the emissions reduction PIM yet, but I'll pause here for your discussion on the utility ownership PIMs. And I can also offer a recommendation.
Yeah, if you can give us a recommendation, that'd be great.
The three-party PIM continues to intrigue advisors, but advisors agree with public service that shifting to it would mark a major change. Given the likely magnitude of its impact and the relatively thin record in this proceeding, advisors agree with staff that the Commission should not attempt to implement the three-party PIM here. We likewise recommend adopting staff's suggested reporting requirements in which the company provides annual calculations in the ECA. Such reporting could pave the way for the three-party PIM in the 2028 ERP. In this vein, advisors recommend requiring staff's proposed reporting on utility-owned assets arising from the 2021 ERP, as well as this JTS. Regarding the CTC and the operational PIM, advisors recommend granting staff's recommendation to order these PIMs in this proceeding. The Commission can continue to address the details of these PIMs in subsequent CPCNs, which is directionally consistent with recommendations from UCA, Climax, and the company. However, the Commission should reaffirm here that the company's Phase 2 bids will set the baselines for the PIMs unless the company can show the existence of extraordinary circumstances. For purposes of the PIM calculation, the Commission should direct public service to file as part of the 120-day report the capital construction cost and associated AFUDC for each utility-owned bid, as well as the capacity factor and levelized cost of energy for each utility-owned renewable bid.
Commissioner Goman.
I don't have a better idea right now than what Mr. Eden laid out. So I would tend to agree with his recommendations here for now. But I think it's important to acknowledge, like, this is not the destination. I think there's really serious concern among this commission about, explosive capital spending in every single part of this system, paired with real-time concerns about reliability on parts of the system, which our staff has investigated in the last year, paired with significant customer service failings over the last year that our staff has investigated. And so I think this is amounting to a really concerning situation where customers' bills could be poised to go up significantly, and at the same exact time that their service appears to be certainly not improving and potentially getting worse. And so, we keep scratching our head in each proceeding once we see however many billions each one is coming in at. And I think we've got to find a way to move in a much more serious way towards some sort of performance basis rather than just rate-based regulation. The clear incentive is more capital spending, and we're certainly seeing that. So like I said, I don't have a great suggestion right now. Of course, I think the reporting sets up a helpful potential for the future. But the problem is we're seeing the capital spending now. Like, the cat's out of the bag. This is already happening. And so, how do we best protect consumers and make sure that we make the performance a significant priority here and prioritize it more than capital spending in terms of actual incentive. So I don't have a great idea right now, but just to set up this discussion again, and I know we're busy right now, I know we'll be busy later, but how do we address this sort of elephant in the room of, I get it's probably premature for the three-party PIM right now on this record, but I think we all acknowledge like a major issue here, major brewing issue for ratepayers, and like, how do we turn the tide of some of these significant concerns? It's part, look, the PIMs probably work, they kind of work, but to me, that's not the destination, is to just build a PIM on top of really exorbitant capital spending. We probably need to focus much more on actual performance rather than capital spending. And where do we do that? And how do we do that? I don't know, but here's where a ton of the capital is coming from. So I think it's an important conversation to continue into this discussion.
Amen. I think the capital spending and the rate impacts associated with it are single largest challenge in Colorado regulation now. And, on this record, we're seeing, conservatively up to 50% impacts on residential customers' rates, in large part driven by the capital spending. So I don't know exactly how to solve it. And the three-party PIM only works for generation. It doesn't work for transmission or distribution. But maybe maybe we just need to pick a project and do this. Because I agree with you. We can pick a low load forecast and adjust it. But ultimately, we just somehow got to find a way to align incentives, customer and shareholder incentives with this utility. It just seems like an endless fight. So, Commissioner Plant.
Yeah. If we did the three-party one, I would approve compensatory curtailment. Yeah, I agree with the recommendation. And also, I mean, I don't know how we go forward on this, but this is something that has come up in almost every big proceeding that we've had. Is that, we realize we need to move more towards some sort of performance-based approach, but I don't know when is the best time to do that, or I mean, clearly it would need to be its own proceeding. I think that, the PUC maybe, what, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, did an M docket on performance-based regulation. But I'm not sure exactly how we talk about moving forward on this. I mean, one of the things that, we could discuss is, changing the regulatory model. And, one of the things that we're obviously, all three of us are concerned about is the impact on rates and whether or not we can maintain, rates with inflation, and maybe allowing, setting a rate indexed on inflation and allowing the company to manage within the revenue, as opposed to,
if they take sales risk, if you don't adjust it for sales.
I mean, it's yeah, it's a risk, but then, on the other side of that, they could have an opportunity to profit above, a regulated rate. But I mean, it's, we need to, as you said, Mr. Chairman, I mean, we need to align incentives. We want the company to be more efficient with the resources that they have, rather than building more, and they earn money by building more. So we're at a sort of an impasse there. But I would agree with the recommendation.
And so, anything else you want to add, Commissioner Gilman?
No, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Eden, for dragging you into the existential crisis here. But this is where the tens of billions live, right? Like, we cannot talk about it. We're talking about tens of billions of dollars here. So this conversation necessarily has to impact here. I guess what I'm thinking in terms of what we commit to now for what this looks like is, yeah, certainly we'll talk about in the CPCNs for utility-owned generation, like what, potential cost to construct or performance PIMs or others look like. But I would certainly like to express a intention to put far more emphasis on performance here, and that may mean those PIMs don't look like they used to look. I don't know. We have to move considerably in that direction. What is known is what you're bidding in terms of cost and in terms of performance is what we expect. and that's what will be brought forward as baseline. So I guess that's the way I'd put it for now, with just this acknowledgement that this is really an unsustainable situation we're looking at in terms of capital, and a recognition from us that, you know, we have got to move more deliberately to more performance-based solutions here.
Just Commissioner Plant's comment, I'd be delighted to give the company all the upside above an 8% sales forecast growth. So I guess with that, Mr. Eden,
All
keep
right.
us moving.
Sure. So the next topic is the emissions PIM. As directed in prior commission decisions, Public Service proposed an emission reduction PIM in its direct. However, Public Service does not recommend adoption of the emissions reduction PIM. Similar to Public Service, staff recommends not approving this PIM here. Given concerns about the PIM's complexity and impacts to ratepayers, staff states it agrees with the company, UCA, WRA suite, and CEO that an emissions PIM should not be adopted at this time. Would you like a recommendation?
I
think I'll just turn it over to Commissioner Gilman.
mean, look, I get it. We don't have the record here. We're never gonna have the record. We've been asking for years for this. And just to be clear, like I think the real goal here is cost-effective carbon reduction, right? Not just the carbon reductions, but are we getting there in the most cost-effective way we can get, especially considering how we thought we were going to get there. So I'm no longer scandalized that this doesn't keep appearing, but as we continue to have that discussion about like what are the high-level performance priorities that we have for the utilities, it certainly strikes me that from a state policy perspective, environmental performance, and especially economic environmental performance, is among them. So if they don't want to give suggestions here, that's fine, but I would still say perhaps maybe just as we continue to discuss this is something that more operates at the commission level without as much input as we would have hoped from the company or others. So yeah, but I mean, I think the outcome here is we don't have the record to do anything here. I don't disagree with that, but I would certainly disagree that this does not remain a priority with regard to our previous discussion.
Commissioner Plant.
Yep, I agree.
As do I.
Okay, I'll move on to the 24/7 carbon-free energy community program. And its direct Public Service puts forth a program concept, the carbon-free energy or CFE acquisition strategy that aims to match a participating customer's electricity consumption with carbon-free generation on an hourly basis. The company does not put forth a finalized program for commission approval, but instead requests the commission simply approve its proposed strategy that CFE serving resources should be next in line after the approved and backup bids in the ERP solicitation. Staff argues the commission should deny as premature the company's proposed concept. Staff argues the commission should not yet approve how resources for these programs will be acquired until the company actually introduce a well-defined program for approval. CEO is generally supportive of the CFE program, including the company's requested strategy, but has several recommendations. These include directing Public Service to ensure that the program is tariff-based, so 24/7 CFE program participants bear the entire cost of the program, and expanding the CFE offering to new large loads. CC4CA opposes the company's proposal that CFE resources be acquired only as incremental resources to the ERP resources that are acquired for all customers. CC4CA asserts it's premature to find that this is the only or most cost-effective pathway to a CFE program. CC4CA suggests, for example, that a CFE program could pay for any incremental cost of zero emissions resources to include bids in the approved portfolio. CC4CA also argues the Commission should direct Public Service to require hourly renewable energy tracking of all eligible energy resources acquired through the JTS, and request that the company be required to convene stakeholders to continue development of a 24/7 CFE product. I'll pause here unless you would like a recommendation.
If you can go to your recommendation, that'd be great.
Advisors recommend granting the company's request and directing that in any future CFE program, CFE resources would be acquired from the company's RFPs, and such resources would be higher in the bid stack than the other selected resources. Any other approach would likely increase the already complex process for evaluating bids. The company's approach also appears to alleviate concerns that customers who choose not to enroll in a CFE program could nonetheless subsidize CFE serving resources. Advisors recommend granting CC4CA's request to direct public service to engage stakeholders to continue development of a CFE product. Advisors would reject, however, the remaining requests from CC4CA and CEO. The remaining specifics for how a CFE program should be designed and tracked, including through hourly rec tracking, are best left for a future filing when there is a concrete proposal.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, I mean, I was more supportive of CC4CA's direction here. I certainly think there's value in pursuing a 24/7 clean energy option, but I think the market and details are far from clear. And to me, it's really premature to know that we should only be including resources from the previous RFP. In that solicitation, I think there are certainly more nascent technologies that are not getting bid into RFPs that may be appropriate for a 24/7 clean program. So, I thought following that suggestion to convene a stakeholder group to kind of hammer out some more of the details of how this offering would work, including with a lot of the potential customers and some ratepayer interests represented would be a good positive step to show interest in it, but to not assume some of these things are a done deal, which I'm just not sure why that's the best route to go at this point. So I would rather support CC4CA's suggestion here, but happy to hear from each of you.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sympathetic to that approach as well. I think that we do need to, examine the options of how such a program would be implemented, and also, we haven't gotten into this yet, but also how it might integrate with, a VPP program that's, matching people's consumption to when clean energy is available or when it's highest in the stack. But yeah, I would support that approach. Mr. Chairman, I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, would you restate, Commissioner Gilman, how you'd modify what Mr. Eden said?
Yeah, I would instead utilize CC4CA's approach, which was to convene a stakeholder group to hammer out some of the details here. I mean, the thing I'm the most skeptical of and just think is premature to settle on the company's concept relates to, only projects that have been in the RFP would be considered for this. I can't tell you offhand what is the exact right process there, but I think that's the exact sort of thing a stakeholder process should figure out. I'm just not sure that with nascent or firm clean technologies that they necessarily will all have been through the RFP process. So that just might be an unnecessary step. Perhaps the stakeholder process comes out with that's the right answer. To me, just at this point, it's premature to say that's the only way a technology or a project enters this kind of unknown program.
I'm okay with that. Does that give you what you need, Mr. Eden?
It does, thank you. And at this point, I'll turn it over to my fellow advisor, Mr. Greenberg, for some additional transmission issues.
Mr. Greenberg.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dan Greenberg of your advisory staff. My first subject today is the potential for the company to fund transmission projects related to the JTS using the bonding authority of the Colorado Electric Transmission Authority, or CETA. WRA and SWEEP advocate that the Commission direct the company to partner with CETA to identify transmission projects that would be good candidates for utilizing CETA's revenue bonding financing, which it contends would mitigate ratepayer impacts. WRA and SWEEP suggested that the JTS transmission portfolio filing may serve as an appropriate vehicle for this partnership. The company states in rebuttal that it and CETA already engaged through the Colorado Coordinated Planning Group, and that the company actively participated in CETA's transmission expansion study. The company remains interested in working with CETA in the future, but notes that CETA is still in policy-making stages for its revenue bonding. As CETA becomes more equipped to provide the services identified in its statutory authority, the company states it's willing to discuss how those authorities may complement the company's transmission planning. So the decision point here is whether or not to require the company to evaluate CETA funding of all transmission projects supporting the JTS. I can pause here or provide a recommendation.
If you have a recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. Advisors recommend that the Commission direct the company to engage actively with CETA and to either propose CETA financing of all transmission projects needed to support the approved JTS portfolios, or provide detailed explanations of why it is not doing so in relevant future CPCN applications.
Commissioner Goodman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I.
Great. Next, a question about the evaluation of dynamic line ratings, or DLR. UCA advocates in its SOPs that the company be required to evaluate DLR for transmission lines on the Colorado Power Pathway and on the missile site to Pronghorn section of the Rush Creek Gentie. The issue arises in this proceeding because the company's JTS transmission study evaluated DLR as a means to mitigate thermal overloads, but excluded the power pathway from consideration for DLR. UCA argues that the company should be required to conduct an analysis, including the costs of upgraded breakers, asserting that even including such costs, DLR is likely to be less costly than new transmission lines. CEO supports UCA's recommendation in its COP. The company states that the lines UCA would like DLR installed on are limited to the 3,000 amp breaker capacities in substations. It states that while these breakers could be upgraded, there's substantial incremental cost to upgrading substation elements that more than likely outweigh the incremental benefits of DLR, particularly given a FERC ruling that requires the company to start using ambient adjusted ratings for its lines. So the decision point is whether or not to require modeling of DLR on these lines. I'll pause here or provide a recommendation.
If you can give us a recommendation, that'd be great.
All right. The company claims that the application of DLR might require breaker upgrades in substations, and so could be much more costly than just installing DLR on its lines. However, the company has not demonstrated that DLR would actually necessitate such breaker upgrades, nor that if required, these upgrades would render DLR non-cost effective. Advisors agree with UCA and CEO that these lines were built to carry large volumes of wind power, and that it's reasonable to investigate whether DLR could cost effectively increase volume of wind energy that they transport. Therefore, we suggest that the Commission adopt a directive that the cost effectiveness of DLR be discussed by the small stakeholder group that's established by the Phase 2 framework, supported by the independent transmission analyst. And if that group finds that it's warranted, the company be required to model and report on the application of DLR to the lines recommended by UCA as part of the assessment of proactive projects described in the framework.
Commissioner Goman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I.
Moving along now to a question about potential transmission link to the Pacific Core system. Per provision in the settlement approved in Phase 1 of proceeding 21A-0441E, the company studied the Gateway South Northwest Colorado 500 kilovolt interconnection project. This project posits a 65 to 80 mile 500 kilovolt connection between either the Craig or Hayden substation and a substation on PacifiCor's Gateway South line. WRA and SWEEP contend that this project would increase the company's access to other power markets and increase the geographic area and thus resource diversity in which it can utilize renewable energy resources, but complained that the company's study of the line was incomplete and that it looked only at reliability impacts, failing to investigate the costs and benefits of the project. In its SOP, WRA and SWEEP asked the Commission to direct the company to conduct a comprehensive study to fully assess the environmental, reliability, and economic benefits of the project, along with any necessary system upgrades and their associated costs and timelines, and to present that study within 18 months of a final Phase 1 decision. WRA and SWEEP suggest that the presentation could be integrated with the JTS transmission portfolio filing to be made in late 2026. The company did not respond to the WRA SWEEP recommendation in either rebuttal or SOP. So the decision point here is whether to require the company to conduct the study that WRA and SWEEP recommend. And I'll pause here or provide a recommendation.
Yeah, let me ask you a question, Mr. Greenberg. I didn't go back and pull it up, but as I recall, in the 2021 ERP on supplemental direct, we required the company to analyze this, and it came back really cost effective. I think the benefits were 4 or 5 times the costs. But the problem was, to build a new line, we needed, approval of the Utah Commission, the Wyoming Commission, the Oregon Commission. There needed to be a bilateral transaction between Pacificor and Excel. And then at the end of the day, you just didn't know if you could count on the resources on the other end of the line. And, so I guess what are we expecting to get out of this study that we didn't get out of the prior one? I mean, it seemed like there were real reasons that we couldn't force them to move forward with the line, because it'd take like 7 or 8 years to build the line. And at the end of the day, you just didn't know if the resources would show up on the other side. So what do you think we're going to get out of this study that we didn't get out of the supplemental direct study 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was?
Mm-hmm. I am not prepared to respond to that question. I didn't go back and refresh on studies done in the prior ERP that were related to this. My preparation for today is based on what's on the record in this case.
Well, let me ask it this way. Say you do the study and it shows that it's cost effective 4 to 5 times to 1. Where do we go from there on this record?
I would expect that we would want to investigate. I know perhaps the Commission would require the company to submit a CPCN for the actual construction of the line. If it's shown to be highly cost effective, then that would certainly, of course, be up to the 3 of you. But my expectation is that any indication that that line is highly cost effective would result in a requirement to go ahead and file a CPCN. And at that point, perhaps the issues that you're suggesting here could be litigated and explored in great detail.
But it's not up to the 3 of us. It's up to Wyoming, Oregon, Utah, and Pacificor, which is the problem with this.
No, I'm suggesting that would be a forum where you could consider whether, or the company, if those are significant issues, I imagine that the company would raise them in any subsequent proceeding.
I mean, I think they raised them in the 2021 ERP, and we ended up acquiring generation in-state directly interconnected to the Excel system because of all those issues. I don't know. I feel like we've been down this path years ago. Commissioner Gelman, do you want thoughts on doing the study or not?
Just racking my brain from the 2021. I do remember that supplemental direct.
Yeah, it was widely cost effective.
I don't remember something that happened yesterday. I remember that. Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that was so difficult was it's shown to be beneficial, and yet we're not going that direction, right? Like, so that's one of the really difficult and frustrating things here. I don't see any harm in the study, I guess I'll say. Like, but what happens next, especially what happens if it's shown to be highly beneficial. I think we'd have to cross that bridge when we get to it. I see no downside in the study, and that if this is something that looks really beneficial for ratepayers, I think we'd have more information upon which to try to require at least pursuit of an option here with more information. So I guess I don't really see the downside, and certainly potential upside if we determine there's significant ratepayer benefits here, and trying to find out how to actually pursue them.
Okay. I mean, we already have a study showing there's very low ratepayer benefits.
I don't know if what was like you're referring to in 2021 ERP was a study. Like it was a response to a supplemental direct question. A study might be giving it too much credit. Like, so
right.
I'm just assuming this would be a more comprehensive look, and perhaps some of it should be what process would have to happen for this to happen, which could answer your question. So maybe the study would be helpful in that regard in terms of.
I like that. All right. So we can broaden it out. What regulatory approvals would you need to see this happen? What would it take to get PacifiCorp involved? What's the resources on the other side of the line? Which, as I recall, all the benefit was, or most of the benefit was capacity sharing, which raised questions about the resource availability on the other end of the line. Commissioner Plant, anything you'd like to add?
No, I would support it.
All right, so Mr. Greenberg, I guess we'll authorize the study, maybe ask a broader set of questions. Does that sort of give you what you need?
It does, and I failed to mention that this line was on CETA's shortlist of projects to pursue. So there is significant opportunity for joint development with CETA here.
Yeah, I think it was just that Hayden, that Gateway South line was what the prior study showed, but you might reference that in the order and make sure we're not duplicating what we've already done. So okay. Keep going.
All right. This next item regards a modeling request that Chair Blank made during his questioning of company witness Stephen Martz during the hearing. At hearing, Chair Blank discussed with company witness Martz the possibility of evaluating transmission impacts of locating much of the large loads the company is forecasting on the high side of the 345 kV system, and thus outside the Denver metro constraint. In its SOP, the company recommends several modifications to the study Chair Blank outlined, which it states align with ongoing market developments, trends, and studies already in progress. Advisors view the company's proposal as an attempt to be responsive to Chair Blank's intent, but it's unclear whether the proposed set of analyses will actually provide the information the chair sought, which was to identify avoidable transmission investment that might be achieved if much or all of the data center load were incentivized to locate either physically or electrically outside of the Denver metro constraint, again, on the high side of 345 kV transformers that serve Denver. The decision point is whether to require the company to modify its study so that it will model power flow under alternate topology assumptions, where the large loads are assumed to be on the 230 kV system in some scenarios and on the 345 kV systems in others. Advisors recommend that the commission issue this directive.
So here's what I'd propose. I'd ask for a revised Encompass run based on the company's low load forecasts as adjusted by the commission's decision in this case regarding EV and beneficial electrification loads, and with updated generic resource cost and tax reform assumptions as suggested by the company. I'd then do a second Encompass run that includes an additional 2,000 megawatts of large late data center load over and above what's included in the first Encompass run. So this will give us sort of what the at least generation impacts are associated with, say, 2,000 megawatts of additional load growth, which was the difference between the original base case and the low load forecast. Then I'd ask for a power flow and transmission capacity expansion analysis for 3 scenarios. One, assuming that the new large loads are limited to existing customers, as in the low load forecast. 2, that the 2,000 megawatts of additional load in the second Encompass run comes online around data center row within the transmission constrained Denver metro area on the 230 kV system or below. And then 3, the 2,000 megawatts of new load comes online outside the Denver metro area on the 345 kV system or on the high side of the Daniels Park and Smoky Hills substation. And I'd just say, for me, I may struggle to approve new generation and transmission to support large new load customers without this basic transmission analysis. We're looking at $13 billion of new transmission. And, I think if we can better manage EV and BE loads, and if we can get the large data center loads outside the Denver metro area in ways that unload the constrained substations, I think there's a decent chance that capital spending can be managed down. So, Commissioner Gilman, thoughts on that? And we can bring that back next week if you want some time to consider it.
Yeah, I think my notes are decent. Okay. When do you want that Encompass run to run? Is that like during evaluating the portfolios? Is that after a preferred portfolio? Help me understand the timing.
Sorry, I think by the time they file the January 31st, 2026 filing for both the Encompass runs and the power flow analysis. So it's the basis or a basis for the tariff filing. I mean,
Okay.
if there's a big cost difference between data centers that locate in the metro area versus outside the metro area, I could see trying to incorporate that difference in the tariff.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is an Encompass run kind of more or less at the conclusion of phase 1 here, but in advance of the January tariff filing. And the target here is really prep for the tariff filing rather than like use in phase 2. I just want to
correct.
Make sure I'm on the same page. And then a lot of the things you articulated, I think, is just the indication that whatever forecasting is used in that Encompass run should mimic the forecasting approved here.
Correct.
Okay.
And
you gave some specifics. I'd be a little more general in this discussion because we're going to get into that next week again. Like, it should mimic the approved forecasting out of phase 1. Period,
absolutely.
Right?
And then I want to add 2,000 megawatts of data center load to see what happens on the generation side if all the load that the company had in its base case forecast shows up.
Okay, I got that. And then for the addition of the 2,000 megawatts, I'm just curious if you want to put any time, like any ramp schedule on that. If you want to like mimic anything we saw in some of the attachments or whatever. It might be good for us to define something there.
As in the base case.
Okay. And so same ramp as the base case. And then tell me again, after that is run and you want the power flow and transmission modeling, you listed 3 conditions. I didn't get the first one completely right.
So the first one is with the low load forecast with the modest
out the 2,000.
Yes.
Okay. I wrote existing. I started writing existing customers, and then I was like moved on to the next thing you were saying. So
yeah. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. I think that works. And so then if this, when's that tariff? End of January is the idea?
January 31st, 2026.
So you would want all of these results to be part of the direct testimony, basically. Okay, so then, yeah, I react pretty well to this. I'm trying to process it. I think it makes sense to me. I think just we have to figure out the timing. Like, when is our forecast, like what we say for the methodology for the forecast actually official in this phase one? When can they actually have that new forecast calculated? Like, we might just have to think through the timing really quick with advisors over the next few days to like make sure the timing here works. Because I don't want just something we don't expect in that tariff filing in terms of timing, but otherwise I am supportive of your concepts.
Thank you, Commissioner Plant.
I support it as well.
Thank you both. Mr. Greenberg, does that give you what you need on that one?
It does, and at this point, I will turn it back to Mr. Eden.
Mr. Eden.
Okay, I'll jump to mapping. In the 2021 ERP, the company provided maps showing the location of various bids, as well as heat maps showing things like net load and curtailments. In this proceeding, several interveners argue that public service should be required to provide similar data in phase 2. You've all previously been briefed on the specifics of these requests, so I won't go into details. As an example, however, CEO requests for public maps of bids relative to disproportionately impacted or DI communities, including a web-based GIS map that shows generalized locations of all bids included in the phase 2 portfolios, the geographic areas of DI communities, and the geographic areas where bids receive modeling credits or adders. CC4CA and Healthy Air and Water both support CEO's mapping request and ask for additional information concerning the location of bids and the Denver Metro North Front Range ozone non-attainment area. CREZ requests that the company should again provide heat maps showing things like net load and curtailment. CREZ requests that such heat maps provide additional information, such as modeled fossil fuel dispatch and modeled storage discharge. Public Service does not appear to respond to these requests, and I have a recommendation if you would like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Advisors recommend granting CEO's DI mapping request. Similar mapping regarding DI communities was provided in the phase 2 of the last ERP, and these requests are supported by both CC4CA and CREZ. Advisors recommend rejecting requests from CC4CA and Healthy Air and Water for maps showing bids in relation to the Denver Metro North Front Range ozone non-attainment area. Regardless of the portfolio of resources the Commission approves in phase 2, projects will need to obtain all applicable permits, including air quality permits. And advisors would recommend granting CREZ's request for heat map information. The company committed to providing similar information in the last ERP, and as CREZ notes, this information will likely be useful.
Commissioner Goman.
I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree.
As do I.
All right. So in light of passage of Senate Bill 23-292, Public Service proposes to fashion the RFP bidding document such that bidders are required to acknowledge and adhere to labor standards set forth in the Commission's rules regarding best value employment metrics, or BVEM, and abide by Senate Bill 23-292 and the Apprenticeship Utilization Law and Prevailing Wage Law, unless otherwise covered by a project labor agreement. Similar to the 2021 ERP, Public Service has retained a labor economist to provide a BVM score for all bids advanced to computer-based modeling based on the BVM information provided. As part of this phase 2 bid evaluation report, the company will provide the labor economist cumulative BVEM score for each portfolio presented. And then advisors would just note that earlier in this proceeding, the Commission received a robust public comment from Laborers International Union of North America Local 720, or Local 720. This entity states that it represents over 1,500 unionized workers. Local 720 asserts that a just transition requires that union labor standards apply equally to both self-build projects and power purchase agreements. Local 720 urges the Commission to require public service to adopt the same union labor provisions for PPAs in Colorado that its Minnesota subsidiary uses. I'll pause here for questions unless you would like a recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have some questions on the Lyuna thing comments, but do you want to address the BVEM first with your recommendation and then talk about the Lyuna comments?
Sure. So in all decisions involved in ERPs, section 40-2-129, subsection 1A, requires the Commission to consider best value regarding employment of Colorado labor and positive impacts on the long-term economic viability of Colorado communities. To this end, the Commission must require utilities to obtain and provide to the Commission information regarding best value employment metrics. The precise information that is required is defined by statute. Public Service, we think, has put forth a reasonable approach to ensuring that the Commission has the necessary information to consider BVEM, including the company's proposal to procure a labor economist to calculate a BVEM score for each portfolio presented in phase 2. And I'll pause here for your discussion or vote.
Commissioner Gilman?
I agree.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree.
As do I. And I guess, Mr. Eden, as I listened to the Lyuna comments in public, and I think they've showed up at multiple forums, my understanding of the concern was that they just wanted some basic protections in the model contract, similar to what was in Minnesota. Otherwise, the competitive tension in the bidding process just creates a race to the bottom where everybody's incentive to minimize labor costs to get, the lowest possible price. And if you just put a couple basic protections in the model contract, at very low cost, you can sort of cut off the race to the bottom. So can you just work with me to look at that? Is the Minnesota offtake agreement in the record?
It was included in the Local 720's public comment.
Okay.
But there hasn't been testimony regarding the specific provisions of that model PPA.
Can you and I just take a quick look at that contract on the labor related provisions in that?
And then sure, we can do that and then bring this back next week. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah. On this one narrow issue, and we better get counsel to help just to make sure it's whatever we do is grounded in the record.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
That's all I had. If we could keep going.
Okay.
Unless, did you have anything on that, Commissioner Plant?
Nope.
No. Okay.
All right. So this next issue concerns Holy Cross, and although Holy Cross did not sponsor any testimony in this proceeding, it submitted a robust SOP seeking to reaffirm its rights under paragraph 46 of the updated settlement agreement in the 2021 ERP. I won't repeat paragraph 46 here, but basically it provides Holy Cross the option to select certain resources and associated transmission rights to replace the 60 megawatts of capacity that Holy Cross will lose when Pueblo Unit 3 retires. The paragraph specifically states that these resources may include projects selected by Holy Cross through the Pueblo Just Transition Resource Solicitation after the portfolio necessary to serve the company's retail customers has been selected. Holy Cross's requests cover a number of topics, including the phase 2 bidding information it is allowed to access to evaluate bids, whether the transmission activities set forth in the phase 2 framework will consider any new transmission Holy Cross needs for its resources, the language that should be added to the RFP to communicate Holy Cross's rights to bidders and which bids are available for Holy Cross to acquire. Holy Cross asserts that Commission guidance interpreting paragraph 46 is important for public service, Holy Cross, and bidders to effectuate the Unit 3 replacement. If the Commission determines that it is not appropriate to provide the guidance requested by this statement in its Phase 1 decision, then Holy Cross requests that its arguments be allowed to be raised again in Phase 2 without prejudice. And no other party commented on Holy Cross's concerns throughout this proceeding. I'll stop here for any questions or discussion, or I can provide a recommendation.
So I guess I have a number of concerns. I just think we're in such a different world now from what was contemplated by the updated settlement agreement that I'm really unclear about the best way forward. And, you know, I think it was simple in a world where you have an RFP, you have backup bids, and then you have a whole bunch of bids that the company was not moving forward with. But now that we have an incremental resource need pool, it's not clear what bids exactly are getting released. And I just think there's all kinds of confidentiality issues with making all these confidential bid prices available to Holy Cross. So given how inadequate I think this record is, I think I'd like to order the company to work with Holy Cross and see if they can come back to us with a way forward. I'm not comfortable with this commission crafting something based on this record. I mean, if the company declines to engage, you know, then we can consider you know, creating something, but I'm not prepared to create something on this record. So that's where I'm at. Commissioner Gilman, thoughts? I guess you have more detailed knowledge of Holy Cross than either of us, so maybe I should have started with you. But
No, just Mr. Eden to go over the landscape. So the updated settlement agreement essentially entitled Holy Cross to have access to bids that were not selected for at least, I guess what we could consider as the base RFP here, or the RFP that comes out of this ERP in part in recognition of their retiring share of Comanche 3. Is that a fair?
Yeah, and I think, yeah, the kind of confusion here results in that the language in the updated settlement says that their rights are for after the portfolio necessary to serve the company's retail customers has been selected. So it's not precise in that language whether it's just the approved portfolio, the backup bids, or the INP pool of bids.
Understood. So, I mean, like with regard to the confidentiality, they were always going to have access to the bids with like as it relates to the settlement. So I don't know that I see that as a new issue or something that's really incredibly complicated to deal with. But I guess the emergence of the incremental need pool and the supplemental RFP complicates this more. Is probably the better way to look at it rather than just the confidentiality being an issue that's already going to be an issue that everybody agreed to in the updated settlement agreement. So yeah, I guess Chairman, your suggestion is to have them negotiate among what pools and with what timing, basically, given the kind of more or less 3 stages, 2.5 stages that are involved here that were not contemplated.
right. Yeah, that's, I mean, I just don't know how to resolve this, given how different the world is from what we saw in the when the updated settlement was filed. There's, you know, price adjusters. I mean, it's just a very complicated, different situation.
So, I think I'm okay with the idea that they can negotiate it, but I think that should all happen before there are actual like phase 2 bids that are in,
Yes.
right? Like this
Yes.
should be done based on a hypothetical, what works. Once you know the real bids, like I think that really muddies up things and could, you know, place priorities in the wrong spot. So I would say it could work to have them try to negotiate this and submit to us whatever they've determined is the best plan. I guess part of the question is anyone else involved in that? Is that just the two of them? And then on what timeline? Like, to me, I think clearly this has to be resolved before you have actual bids. So those are kind of my remaining questions, maybe with your chosen method.
That works for me.
I just
Commissioner
don't know
Freeman?
who. I mean, there's a ton of parties here. Like, who is in this? Yeah. Mr. Waffle.
Uh-oh.
Hey, we made it 2.5 hours without counsel. I could have thought 10 more spots where you would have intervened instead of this one, but fire away.
Believe it or not, I was here the whole time. If I may, I think, can I put some bones and clarity around what I think I'm hearing between the commissioners?
Yep.
I think, Chair, your concept is really to go with Holy Cross's alternative, which is that they you would be declining to make a ruling through this phase 1 decision, which I think is supported by the fact that this was raised for the first time in SOPs. It's really unclear because there wasn't a company response whether or not there is truly a controversy with the interpretation of the settlement. So I think your direction to the company to confer with Holy Cross, and that an appropriate filing can be made if there continues to be concerns, but that conferral should consider, you know, obviously these bidding concerns and the confidentiality and the process as it exists now, which is obviously a bit different than perhaps what they were thinking, given that we've got a 2 RFP concept in play here. I think that if that's a correct interpretation of kind of the direction that you're going, that makes sense. I would suggest that you direct that the company provide, you know, whether or not we see a filing, an appropriate filing before then, given the timing here, that the company address the results of that conferral in the 120-day report so the commission can know what had happened with its conferral with Holy Cross regarding these concerns.
I would like to see it before the 120-day report. So I think I'd like to see it before the bids come in. So that would be the only modification I'd make to what you said. And to Commissioner Gilman's point, I think that could look very different once the bids are in. So Commissioner Gilman, thoughts on what Ms. McLaughlin said, or my one modification to it?
No, I agree. I'm fine with what she said, and I agree with your modification. I think it's just helpful if everyone agrees what's fair ahead of having real bids. And then, so yeah, whatever that deadline is before the RFP is issued or whatever, I don't know, that's enough time. Yeah, that should be enough time. And then I guess it would just get filed here and we'd have it so everyone has the understanding how it's going to work.
Okay, Commissioner Plant.
I agree.
All right, council, not yelling, not scolding us. Mr. Eden, keep going.
Yeah. In its answer testimony, staff notes that public services cost assumptions for its resources may form the basis for future performance evaluation, and thus the company should be required to conduct resource planning with reasonably accurate cost projections. Staff put forth analysis, however, showing discrepancies between the modeled future production cost and past reported cost for certain company-owned generation resources. Staff asks the Commission to order an independent review of the company's processes for developing modeling cost assumptions for existing resources. As an alternative to an immediate investigation, staff suggests the Commission could require the company to file a benchmark comparison of its existing resources, historic and future modeled costs, and future phase 1 ERP filings, and require the company to identify and explain any material discrepancies in modeled cost in future ERPs. Public Service did not respond to this issue, and I have a recommendation if you would like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Advisors agree with staff and recommend the Commission order an independent review of the company's processes for developing, modeling, and cost assumptions for existing resources. The performance assumptions for company-owned facilities can have far-reaching impacts, and staff's assertions that there are significant discrepancies between current assumptions and those that the company reported elsewhere are troubling. To initiate this independent review, advisors recommend directing staff and Public Service to confer and file a notice in this proceeding no later than December 31st, 2025, detailing the results of the conferral. This should include whether the independent review will take place via an in-docket, an I-docket, a standalone application, or some other procedural path.
Commissioner Goldman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I.
Okay, I'll next move to the omnibus motion, which was, and I'll handle the first group of issues, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Greenberg to address an issue in the omnibus motion regarding injection capacity. So Public Service argues in the omnibus motion that it filed at the beginning of this proceeding that the resource planning procedures have become increasingly complex over the course of the past several ERP cycles, with an unprecedented number of submitted bids, resulting in portfolios with several gigawatts of new resources and billions in new clean energy related investments. The company expects the 2024 JTS to be similarly complex, and thus requests an extension of the phase 2 deadlines. And these deadlines are set forth in rules 3618BI, 3613A, 3613D, and 3613E through H. In its SOP, staff argues that the company's requested waivers of the phase 2 deadlines should all be denied. Staff notes that Public Service has not provided further testimony related to these requests or otherwise shown a need for timing extensions given the evolution of the phase 2 framework. Staff asserts the phase 2 framework and the relatively limited number of modeling portfolios should help ease the company's concerns about the deadlines. If the company determines in phase 2 that extensions are still needed, staff argues the company can seek extensions as it has in the last ERP. CEO and CEI likewise oppose the company's request. In fact, CEI asks that the Commission adopt an aggressively expedited phase 2 schedule in light of the impacts from the federal reconciliation bill. And I'll stop here unless you would like a recommendation.
Yeah, if you could give us a recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. For the reasons set forth by staff and CEO, advisors recommend denying the company's requested waivers regarding the extension of the phase 2 timelines. Advisors are hopeful that the decisions made in phase 1, including limiting bid variations that do not require a separate bid fee, and largely approving the phase 2 framework with a reduced load forecast, make the phase 2 bid evaluation and selection process more efficient. In addition, Public Service now has more experience with the Encompass modeling tool. Although advisors agree with CEI that the federal reconciliation bill added additional time pressures for the acquisition of renewable energy resources, advisors worry that CEI's expedited phase 2 schedule is impractical and may lead to costly mistakes. As such, we would recommend against adopting CEI's phase 2 schedule.
Commissioner Goldman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I. Mr. Greenberg.
Hello again. So this next issue regards injection capacities of potential interconnection points for bidders in this RFP. In the company's motion, it requested a waiver of rules 3608C3 and 4, requiring information on injection capacities of all transmission assets. The company contends that providing a fixed injection capability to any location on the system is misleading, because the injection capability determined for a given location in the transmission system is highly dependent on the assumed generation and storage dispatch pattern. Therefore, the maximum injection capability corresponds only to the most favorable system condition expected to occur. Because this system condition rarely occurs, the company contends an injection capability number by a specific location is not a valid metric for the actual injection capability. UCA argues that injection capability needs to be reported in phase 1 so that bidders can determine where to site their projects in phase 2. UCA contends that the absence of this information gives a company an unfair advantage over independent developers. UCA therefore recommends that the Commission require the company to provide interconnection capability information prior to the base RFP. Interwest asks the Commission to direct the company to provide transparent, actionable, and timely information about potential interconnection points such as status of terminal bays, presence of fiber options, flow gate data, and any known limiting elements. Staff supports the waiver, but notes the company has a responsibility to describe the dynamic nature of its transmission system, how it's modeled, and how it changes under different scenarios. The response goes on to state that staff, quote, expects the company to provide complete explanations and responses to discovery requests reasonably calculated to better understand transmission transfer capabilities. So the decision point here is whether to approve the waiver as requested or approve it but require additional information. And I'll pause here for your deliberations or can provide a recommendation.
Yeah, if you can give us a recommendation, Mr. Greenberg, that'd be great.
All right. While advisors agree with the company that injection capacity at any location is a very dynamic quantity, UCA's argument that developers need information on available injection capacity is valid, and its absence may give the company a competitive advantage. Advisors believe the company should be able to utilize historic SCADA data to provide statistical information on likely interconnection points. Advisors therefore recommend that the company be required to provide the following for each interconnection point at which the company has received either commercial inquiries or formal requests for interconnection studies from developers over the last 2 years. And those quantities would be, the maximum capacity available in the most recently completed calendar year. The number of hours available capacity fell into each of 10 bins, each representing 10% of the maximum, and the mean, median, and standard deviation of available capacity.
So I like that request. I just sensitive to the burden, just qualify it with some reasonableness, or if there's alternative approaches that are more readily available. So I just soften it a little bit, but generally agree with the request. So just commercially reasonable, maybe. Commissioner Gilman?
Yes, I agree.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree also.
Does that give you what you need, Mr. Grimberg?
It does, and I think we're back to Mr. Eden now.
Mr. Eaton?
All right, so there's one last piece of the omnibus motion. As part of the motion that the company filed at the beginning of this proceeding, the company requested a waiver of Rule 3612A's timing requirement so that the company could delay filing the motion for approval of the independent evaluator, or IE, until 2 weeks before the hearing. And decision number C24-0941, issued back in December of 2024, the Commission granted this portion of the omnibus motion. Contrary to the Commission's directive in this decision, however, Public Service has not filed a motion to approve an IE. So advisors recommend that the Commission direct the company to file this motion with the required conferral as soon as reasonably practicable, but no later than 2 weeks prior to the issuance of the base RFP.
Commissioner Gilman?
I agree.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree.
As do I.
Okay, so in addition to the waivers and variances requested in the omnibus motion, staff argues the Commission needs to grant certain variances of the Commission rules in order to implement the Phase 2 framework. Staff recommends a permanent variance to paragraph 97 of decision number C22-0459, and this is the phase one decision in the last ERP, to allow for the JTS wrap to extend through 2033 as contemplated in the JTS phase two framework. In addition, in order for the company to file its next ERP in 2028, as the phase two framework contemplates, staff requests the Commission grant a permanent variance to paragraph 45 of the same decision, as well as a variance to Rule 3603 subpart A as necessary. And I can offer a recommendation if you would like.
That'd be great.
These variances appear to be uncontested. So for the reasons set forth by staff, advisors recommend the Commission grant these requests.
Commissioner Goman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I.
Okay, so sticking with the theme here, Public Service requests a partial and permanent variance from Rule 3206 subpart BI. And at a high level, this would allow the company to skip the CPC approval process for transmission lines that are constructed to serve a single customer and which are paid for entirely by that customer. The company asks that this variance be granted for all transmission facilities constructed for new large load customers that will take electric service from a transmission line designed at a 230 kilovolt or above, and that serves a single retail customer. Public Service asserts it has a robust pipeline of potential large new customers that will require transmission level service to their facilities. According to the company, granting this variance will reduce procedural hurdles and will enable the company to interconnect these customers more quickly. Staff argues that the company's requested CPC invariance is premature, knowing that the company concedes that a decision on this point is not necessary in phase one. Staff further warns that the company's request appears to extend well beyond the projects needed to implement the JTS. Would you like a recommendation here?
Yes, please.
For the reasons set forth by staff, advisors recommend denying as premature the company's partial and permanent variance request from Rule 3206B.
Commissioner Goman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I.
Okay. Public Service also proposes that all post-ERP CPCNs should be based on a 120-day timeline, so long as the generation projects are consistent with the as-bid projects. If the project as bid has won in a competitive solicitation and the material terms of such project remain consistent, the company argues that 8 to 9 months of regulatory process for a CPCN proceeding is not necessary. Public Service further argues that resource adequacy and cost management considerations counsel in favor of the Commission granting this timing tool. Staff opposes the company's request for a default 120-day review process for post-ERP CPCNs for several reasons. Staff asserts the company's proposal would make it difficult for parties to provide meaningful oversight and review of the company-owned generation resource. Staff also argues that deciding this issue in phase one is premature because such a decision is unnecessary to conduct phase two, and the scope of these CPCN proceedings are not yet known. Would you like my rec?
Please.
Advisors recommend denying the company's request as premature. The company's request risks putting the burden on the Commission to quickly evaluate and determine whether a CPCN application is consistent with the company's phase two bid. Given the Commission's constrained resources, a more efficient path would be for Public Service to work together with staff, UCA, and other interested stakeholders prior to filing its CPCN applications. Interested stakeholders could agree in their interventions that the company's application is consistent with its phase two bid and that there are no other unresolved issues that need to be resolved, such as the utility-owned PIMs. The Commission should emphasize that in such a situation where parties agree that an expedited timeline is appropriate, the Commission will work diligently to process the CPCN applications within such timeline.
Commissioner Gutman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
As do I. I think that completes this stage of the deliberation. I have one more thing I'd like to get out there on commercial principles, but I'm thinking we'd start next week with Mr. Greenberg on the resource adequacy thing we got to bring back. Or did you have more?
There's a couple other issues. There's the Pueblo Energy Park, the request to track and defer adjudication costs, and then the updates to modeling inputs and assumptions. And then that will complete stage 3 or step 3. And then the next issue would be the date for the resource adequacy study. So I can go to the Pueblo Energy Park, or I can stop here if you like.
How long do you think the remaining issues are?
Maybe 10 minutes.
But do you guys have a hard stop at noon, or do you want to try and knock this stuff out?
Never need to stop.
You're younger than I am.
I wouldn't say never, but
yeah, that's what I'm.
but I'm good to keep going.
All right, Mr. Eaton, keep us going.
So the Environmental Justice Coalition, or EJC, proposes the concept of a renewable energy park in Pueblo. EJC explains that renewable energy parks have 4 components: renewable energy, short duration battery storage, industrial customers with flexible loads, and long duration energy storage. EJC urges the Commission to direct Public Service in its Phase 1 decision to convene a stakeholder process to study the development of a renewable energy park in Pueblo. Public Service would be required to file a report in this proceeding no later than 1 year after the Commission's final Phase 1 decision that discusses and recommends the next steps for building renewable energy parks a renewable energy park in Pueblo. And as you know, the Commission received numerous public comments discussing a renewable energy park, most of which were strongly supportive of the concept. For example, Sarah Martinez of the Pueblo City Council and Matthew Martinez from the Colorado House of Representatives both filed public comments urging the Commission to support the Pueblo Energy Park concept. Public Service opposes the request to study the development of a renewable energy park in Pueblo, arguing that doing so would be redundant with the study Public Service conducted in Pueblo following the last ERP, which resulted in the PISAC study. Public Service notes that it will accept all renewable and storage bids proposed in the Pueblo area as part of the Phase 2 all-source solicitation, including a renewable energy park if such a proposal is bid. I'll stop for any questions, but I can go on to my recommendation as well.
That'd be great.
Advisors recommend against requiring Public Service to study the concept of a renewable energy park in Pueblo. The Energy Innovation Report that EJC submitted into the record already shows the potential benefits and existing challenges with deploying a renewable energy park in Pueblo. The report finds that one of the primary barriers to deploying an energy park is attracting industrial customers to serve the crucial role of flexible load. Similarly, one of the key components of a renewable energy park is the existence of long-duration energy storage. For both of these components, another stakeholder study in Pueblo is unlikely to yield material benefits. Instead, advisors recommend the Commission direct the company to continue advancing efforts to develop load flexibility for large loads. At a minimum, Public Service should address load flexibility in the new large load tariff filing, and possibly as part of the clean transmission tariff considerations. Regarding long duration energy storage, this technology appears to be a prime candidate for the Carbon-Free Future Development, or CFFD, funding. Advisors recommend the Commission encourage Public Service to fully evaluate options to promote long duration energy storage through the CFFD process.
Commissioner Goodman.
I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think that the Energy Innovation Report provides a really good basis, and part of the advantage is the co-location really of the load and the generation. And, some of the flexibility can be provided through, depending on what the technology is and how it's implemented through just sort of managing the load directly, but then also energy storage. And so looking at to what extent long duration, is necessary if paired with the right sort of application of large load at the energy park. Um, and really, I think the economic advantages that it could offer to the Pueblo area as well, as a part of the evaluation. But I agree that the Energy Innovation Report really gives them a good step up, and that they can base some of their ongoing investigations of the Pueblo Energy Park on the study that was provided.
Um, Supportive of Commissioner Plant's comments and agree with your recommendation.
Okay. So the company requests deferral of expenses related to consultant work, transcripts and hearing costs, and outside legal counsel. For most of these requests, the company proposes to track the cost in a non-interest-bearing regulatory asset that will be reviewed for recovery purposes in a future rate case. However, Public Service requests to recover the costs of the independent facilitator associated with the CFFD, the labor economist, and the IE through the ECA. UCA opposes the request to recover the labor economist fees through the ECA. UCA argues that fees associated with the labor economist should instead be included in the deferred account, similar to the deferred account with other outside consultants. UCA also argues the company should be directed to use any overcollection of bid fees to offset the adjudication cost in the deferred account. UCA suggests this offsetting could be done through accurate accounting of the cost of bid evaluation with bid fee receipts. The company opposes UCA's requests. Regarding the labor economist fees, Public Service argues these costs are similar to those associated with the IE, which have traditionally been recovered through the ECA. Regarding bid fees, Public Service argues the purpose of bid fees is to offset the company's cost of evaluating bids during the Phase 2 process, not to offset the cost of prudently incurred expenses from litigating this proceeding. Would you like a recommendation on this?
Please.
Advisors recommend granting the company's request to cover the cost of the independent facilitator and the labor economist through the ECA. This was the approach that was agreed upon in the 2021 ERP, and UCA's arguments do not justify changing it. Regarding the IE, Public Service has not yet filed the motion to approve an IE. Advisors recommend deferring consideration of cost recovery for the IE until the decision ruling on the motion to approve the IE. Advisors recommend granting in part UCA's arguments regarding bid fees. Advisors agree with Public Service that the purpose of bid fees is to offset the company's cost of evaluating bids during the Phase 2 process, not to offset the cost of adjudicating this proceeding. It is unclear, however, what costs the company incurs in evaluating bids that it does not already recover elsewhere. Advisors recommend the Commission direct Public Service to provide an accounting of the cost of the bid evaluation, along with all bid fees receipts, in the company's next ERP annual report to have more transparency on this issue. In all other respects, advisors recommend the Commission grant the company's request to track and defer adjudication expenses in a non-interest-bearing regulatory asset.
Commissioner Goman?
Thanks, Mr. Eaton. Yeah, I agree. I'm honestly a little confused about the bid fee piece. I mean, I agree with your recommendation. It's not clear what staff time or other expenses paid on evaluating bids would not already be being recovered or being requested to be recovered elsewhere. So I certainly have a lot of sympathy to UCA's point there. I think getting the information would be number one, but To the extent there's additional bid fee coming in that's not recovered, that's not offsetting something being recovered elsewhere, it seems somewhat reasonable to me that the next step would be that it would offset the adjudication costs here. So I think it's fine to go about getting that additional information, but I'm very interested to see what comes in. This point the company's making doesn't make a ton of sense to me here.
Commissioner Plan,
I agree.
as do I. Mr. Eden?
Just a quick clarification on that. Did that modify the recommendation, and that the commission is directing the public service to offset any or to use any unneeded bid fees to offset the adjudication expenses, or is the commission just going to reevaluate that after the reporting?
I mean, it's unclear where they're going, right? Like if the assumption that I'm coming in is like it's reasonable to assume these employees already work there. They're already getting paid, whatever is already going on. So it's really unclear like what the additional expenses and the IE cost is already covered. What are the additional expenses in reviewing these bids? So it's hard to say like without the information. I'm also unclear. I mean, like if we use it to offset the adjudicatory expense versus just to offset rate base in some other way, or like rates, revenue requirements, I should say, in some other way, are those just equal? Like, I don't really know, but what we're clearly missing here is some transparency around where the bid fees are going and how they're offsetting costs, whether that's in the adjudication or otherwise in a revenue requirement. So I don't know.
I mean, it's a multi-million-dollar issue. I think the bid fees are what, like $10,000 or something, Mr. Eden, and you got 200 of them, so it probably is a multi-million-dollar issue. So yeah, I would just say the revenue from the bid fees should offset the other costs. I like that. You okay with
Like
that?
adjudicatory costs, you mean in this proceeding?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that. Mathematically, it probably works out the same either way. It's just like the lack of transparency about where this income from the bid fees is actually showing up is kind of troubling to me. This seems like a very obvious place for it to go.
I agree. Commissioner Plan, any concerns with that?
No, I agree.
Mr. Eden,
Okay.
does that give you what you need?
I think so. I heard an agreement to require the additional reporting and also to adopt UCA's position that any over collected bid fees should be used to offset the adjudication costs in this proceeding.
Yep.
Okay, home stretch here. Section 211 of Volume 2 sets forth the inputs and assumptions public service intends to use during the Phase 2 modeling process. These inputs and assumptions include things like the gas price forecast, as well as the company's demand and energy forecast and projected resource capacity needs. In Volume 2, Public Service states that, consistent with past practice, the company will update the modeling inputs and assumptions as necessary. During the hearing, company witness Mr. Eiley specifically committed to providing an updated load forecast 30 days before the issuance of the RFP. Mr. Eiley anticipated that this update would be a full refresh of the load forecast and include refinements to the company's EV and plug-in hybrid forecast. So the decision point is what updates you'd like to direct the company to make prior to the issuance of the RFP. And I have a recommendation if you'd like to go with to start there.
Yep, that'd be great.
So except as modified in its Phase 1 decision, the Commission should approve the modeling inputs and assumptions the company outlined in Section 2.11 of Volume 2. And then, consistent with past practice and the company's commitments during the hearing, the Commission should order Public Service to file 30 days prior to issuing the base RFP a complete list of the modeling inputs and assumptions consistent with the presentation in Section 2.11 of Volume 2, and indicate which parameters were updated for bid evaluation and selection purposes. This includes incorporating the Commission's directives on things like which large loads to include in the forecast and revisions to the company's EB and BE estimates. To the extent that any parameters are still to be updated after the RFP is issued, but prior to the Phase 2 resource evaluation, the Commission should require the company to identify the parameters and provide the updated values in the 120-day report. And then, given the various changes the Commission is directing Public Service to make in its RFP, advisors also recommend directing the company to file its final RFP in this proceeding at least 30 days prior to the RFP issuance, consistent with the Commission's decision to adopt the company's proposed process for reaching a final non-negotiable PPA prior to the RFP. Advisors also recommend directing the company to file its final revised PPA set, including all of the Commission's directives, at least 30 days prior to the RFP issuance. And then finally, I would just add, it's my understanding that following your Holy Cross discussion, that 30 days before the RFP issuance, the company would also file a notice of conferral about the results of its conferral with Holy Cross, and it may also include updated language in its RFP alerting bidders to the rights that Holy Cross has under the settlement agreement.
And just one last question before we put it to a vote. I assume we're going to update the generic resource cost estimates consistent with the rebuttal testimony filing.
Yes, that is correct. And the generic resource costs are one of those inputs in section 2.11. So we would be able to see those in the update.
Oh, because there's a revised technical volume 2 technical appendix that's part of this record. So when you refer to the technical appendix, you mean as it's updated post rebuttal testimony.
Right. The updates that are going to incorporate all of the Commission's directives in this Phase 1 decision, including the Commission's decision to use the updated generic prices.
Commissioner Gellman.
Yes, I agree. And I was just double checking, but yeah, this is all with regard to the base RFP, so the expectations for filing timeline for new forecasts and updates with supplemental RFP. I think at least for forecast is extended in that one for that process we talked about. But I think that's all clear. I was just double checking it's all clear, but I'm fine with your recommendation here.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree.
As do I.
Okay, and then that concludes the step 3 items. It's my understanding that the Commission is anticipating bringing this back next Wednesday afternoon for a CDM. I think that will probably be the final CDM. And I'll pause here for any questions or allow you to wrap this up here.
Yeah, so I just want to put forward some thoughts on the commercial principles. We're not going to vote today, or I would not propose to vote today, and I'll give these to advisors so you have them in front of you. But just for your consideration and just for discussion next week, I'd like to propose the following for the commercial principles. Which would only apply to pre-tariff approval of large load contracts, which the company was seeking to use to adjust the load forecast and to build new generation. So first, I'd probably suggest that we do away with the 80, 90, and 100% language and structure. For me, 2 signed contracts do not imply that any load is 100% guaranteed to come online. As Mr. Iden pointed out, based on the Dominion experience, where roughly half of the new contracted load never materialized. Second, to commit to new generation under the commercial principles, I'd ask that new large load customers sign both an ISA, an interconnection services agreement, and an energy supply agreement. Third, I'd leave the long-term commitment in the commercial principles, but would include the CEC fair notice provision that lets customers know that the tariff may change. Fourth, I'd ask that the credit support and exit fee provisions be included in both in the ESA, the Energy Supply Agreement, which is a retail contract subject to Colorado PUC jurisdiction, limiting the credit support and exit fee language solely to the ISA makes it FERC jurisdictional and outside Colorado control. Fifth, I'm concerned that the 3 months of bill requirement in the credit support provisions in the ISA on a 15-year contract is something like 1/60th the value of the contract in nominal dollars. So I suggest we adopt the UCA request and increase the commitment to 6 months. I also agree with UCA and would not allow large customers to be exempted from the ECA, the PCCA, or the TCA as part of the commercial principles. Finally, I'd ask the company to file as part of its advice letter tariff filing in January a detailed Colorado-specific ISA and ESA that is consistent with these modified commercial principles, whatever we end up doing, and clearly lays out the credit support and exit fee provisions. For example, the ISA on the record of this case was, something I think from MISO and not in any way Colorado specific. So I just throw that out there. I'll get this language to advisors, and if we can talk about it and make a final decision next week, that'd be great. So I don't know, Commissioner Gilman, any comments on any of that? And I guess any questions or clarifications? Let's not try and decide this today.
I think I have it. Yeah, the two remaining things I think would be size of load
Right.
that trigger these thoughts, and like not totally unrelated to that, but a little bit different is the potential for large loads that are not connecting at the transmission level. And that might be somewhat dependent on that size that we determine, but as we understand it, they don't sign IAs or ESAs. It's different type of agreement, if any. And so those would be the two outstanding issues. I don't like at first hearing have any issues with your list, but I think those two things need to be added, the size trigger for these principles, as well as what to do about distribution connected. I think it's simply that there also is an expectation that there is a relevant document making the same requirements, even if it's off the distribution level. But anyway, those are the two things I would add as outstanding to your list. But I don't have any issues with your list as I think right now.
Yeah, and I totally agree and support the fact that we gotta decide both the size and what to do with distribution customers. Commissioner Plant, any comments, thoughts, questions?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that list sounds good, and I'm not sure if the size and the distribution question are kind of related, because if it's over a certain amount, maybe it's not on the distribution system anywhere. But yeah, I would agree with that, and forward to discussing next week.
All right, Mr. Eden, thanks to you and Mr. Greenberg for taking us through this in a concise and incisive way. Even though it took 3 hours, we got through a ton. So as always, appreciate you guys and council. Anything further for today? You have what you need?
Yes, I think we have what we need for today. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. And with that, we're adjourned and see you in a couple of hours. No rest for the weary.